All right, I'm going to start the webinar.
Calling to order the regular meeting of the Albany Unified School District Board of Education on September 22nd, Tuesday. May we have a roll call?
Superintendent Wells. Superintendent Wells? Okay, I'll come back to him. President Trutane?
Here.
Vice President Duran?
Here.
Trustee Clark?
Here.
Trustee Doss?
Here.
Trustee Hinckley?
Here.
Student Board Member Corzo Clark?
He said he's in, but he's not as a panelist. If you could upgrade him as a panelist.
Thank you. I'll do that. Okay, and Student Board Member Mala?
Here.
Thank you. Superintendent Wells?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shen. We'll now have the Pledge of Allegiance. Join if you wish. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Will our student board members please read the AUSD mission and vision statement and our meeting norms?
The mission of Albany Unified School District is to provide excellent public education that empowers all to achieve their fullest potential as productive citizens. AUSD is committed to creating comprehensive learning opportunities in a safe, supportive, and collaborative environment, addressing the individual needs of each student.
Our meeting norms are to maintain a focus on what is best for our students, to ensure a safe environment for all views to be expressed, treating each other, staff, and the public respectfully, to endeavor to find common solutions to issues through collaboration without sacrificing one's belief in what is best for students, and to make a commitment to effective deliberation, each one listening with an open mind while others are allowed to express their points of view.
Thank you, student board members. We move to item number 5, approval of the agenda. Board and Dr. Wells, are there any changes requested to the agenda tonight?
President Trutane, I don't see any.
Thank you. Can I have a motion?
I move to approve the agenda.
I second.
May we have a roll call vote, please?
Student Board Member Corzo Clark?
Yes.
Student Board Member Mala?
Yes.
Vice President Duran?
Yes.
President Trutane?
Yes.
Trustee Hinckley?
Yes.
Trustee Doss?
Yes.
And Trustee Clark?
Yes.
Thank you.
The agenda passes unanimously. We move to item number 6, our spotlight. I'm so glad that we have a spotlight tonight. And I'm happy to have the Albany High School Band and Choir featured.
President Trutane, if I may, we have Mr. Bryant and Ms. Stalker with us tonight if they would like to say anything. Do you want to show the video first?
We'll see. I don't know if Mr. Bryant wants to speak before or after his spotlight. I do know that Ms. Stalker wants to speak before we move on to the choir.
I can speak briefly, Kim, if that's all right.
Sure, go right ahead.
Thanks. I just want to say thank you to everybody for having us on tonight for the spotlight. But most importantly, I just want to give a shout out to all my colleagues at the middle school and the high school. Both Mary and I teach there at both sites. And I'm so proud of the work that we're all doing. I can tell you that it feels like being a first year teacher. even though this is year 16 for me. And so with a lot of grace and patience, we're going to get through this. And I just want to say thank you to my colleagues at both sites.
And I want to say thank you for preparing this. I have seen this video ahead of time, and both you and Ms. Stocker put together amazing pieces. And it really, even though I have a kid in the high school band, I didn't realize how complex it was to run these classes through Zoom. And I have a much greater appreciation of your work now. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Craig Bryant, and I'm the band orchestra teacher here at Albany High School. Kim asked if Mary and I would be willing to share some of the work that music students have done at the start of this school year, and we're happy to do that. One of the questions we get as music teachers is, how are you teaching music online? How are you teaching band on Zoom? And I know that it comes with its challenges, but I'm very proud of the work that we've been able to get done in just a few short weeks here. So, you know, the essence of music making is people playing together or singing together. And unfortunately, that's kind of off the table right now. So our answer to that has been collaborative recording. And I want to give you a little peek about what that looks like and what that sounds like. On your screen right now, you're seeing the first recording project that the Albany High School Jazz Band is completing this year. This is a recording of the Miles Davis tune Freddie Freeloader. And I'll give you a little taste while I talk over it a little bit. Each student was given a guide track, and then they recorded their parts solo and then submitted them back to me, where I edited and mixed them together. And we're using a program here called Soundtrap. A big shout out to Albany Music Fund for providing the high school students with subscriptions to this for the year. I really appreciate that. We're lucky to have them. Students used a variety of devices to record: iPhones, computers, Chromebooks. Maybe they have a nicer audio interface or something like that there. And I'm really proud of the way that it turned out. Next steps for us are going to be continuing to kind of refine this process of audio recording, and then move to adding video so that we can put together a winter concert in mid-December to share with the public. I want to thank Kim for having the music teachers on here tonight, and I want to thank the school board and Dr. Wells for their support of music education here in Albany. I feel very fortunate to work here, and hope everybody has a great night. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Craig. I think we're going to move on to Ms. Stocker now.
Hello, am I audible now?
We can hear you.
Awesome. So just wanted to echo, that was everything that Craig said. Absolutely. Super thankful to be able to show you what we've been doing. The choirs are doing a very similar thing to what Craig showed. And so we have been turning in files in a very similar process. He outlined it. And I'm just very thankful, as I think many of our teachers are, to be part of such an amazing district with really fantastic and on top of it students, parents, board members, district officials. The job of all of you is not easy, and I'm just grateful to have amazing colleagues and people to work with. So I hope that you enjoy the 2 choral recordings that we have for you. Short little bits of what we're doing in class.
She is gentle and also wise. Oh, she beareth the Christ, that ever lies. To hear her sing, to see her dance, she will rest herself at rest. That's ever our song.
Hang in there, folks. It'll load soon.
Okay, I'm gonna stop it and try it again.
Okay.
Oops.
President Tutane, we saw a piece of the clip, and based on the piece we saw so far, it's amazing how disciplined our students are. Oh, here it's back.
There we go. This is the treble chamber.
He's a man and women everywhere, and proclaim it far and wide. The earth is yours, and the fullness thereof. This is your time. Proclaim it far and wide. Lift your voices high, for this is your time.
It's just beautiful. Dr. Wells or trustees, do you have any quick words of thanks for our students and for Ms. Stalker and Mr. Bryant?
I would just say that what the students do is so powerful because it makes me happy, me calm, and I think it's such a wonderful contribution to our whole community. So I just want to thank all you students.
Yeah, I want to second that. I was in the band in middle school and high school, so it's a special place in my heart for everybody participating. So I just really, it was nice to, to see this and, keep up the great work. Also, special thanks to Mr. Bryant, who, when he wasn't, doing a great job with the band, was also helping me out delivering food to families in the district. So, just, showing that one big family, trying to do what's best for everybody. So a special shout out to him for that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, love more of the calming, joyful elements of our meetings and our day. It's wonderful.
President Tutane, this is a reminder of all the wonderful things that go on in our schools and how both our teachers and our students make this a special and preferred place. My hats off to both Mr. Bryan and Mrs. Mary Stalker. I get to see them and I miss seeing them on a regular basis. But when you want to pick me up or spirit lifted, you go to one of those classes and you come out okay.
Well, I must say, I'm really looking forward to the winter concerts. So I will be attending in person if we're allowed to, or by Zoom if they're virtual. But thank you both very, very much for getting that together for us. We do appreciate it. We will move on then.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Yeah. We'll move on to our agenda item number 7, approval of the consent calendar. Any comments or questions about items on the consent calendar? If not, if I can have a motion, please.
I move that we approve the consent calendar.
Second.
May I have a roll call vote, please?
Student Board Member Corzo Clark,
Yes.
Student Board Member Mala,
Yes.
President Trutain,
Yes.
Trustee Hinckley,
Yes.
Trustee Doss,
Yes.
Trustee Clark,
Yes.
Vice President Duran.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks to the board for that. I wanted to point out that one of the contracts that we just passed with the consent calendar is for the special extra help that we need to do special education assessments during this pandemic time. So I know that that was mentioned at a previous board meeting in our special education update, that we would need to secure the services of an outside contractor so that we could move forward on assessments. And the district has done that. And hopefully now some of those emergency assessments can move forward. Now that brings us to item number 8, superintendent and board member reports. Dr. Wells.
Thank you, President Trutain. In the superintendent report, I just wanted to spend a moment sharing with you the road to reopening schools and some of the current thinking and our current climate. My first slide, basically, it'll be up in a moment. Okay, let's go to the next slide. The road to reopening. Where are we at? That's a really good question. I want to spend a quick moment or two just kind of sharing with you some updates. Next slide. As you know, we have here in California the 4-tier framework for determining our current climate as it relates to COVID-19. And so we have been in the purple, which is considered widespread, more than 8% positive out of, I believe, 100,000. And today, we moved to what we call the red, substantial. And that's big for a number of reasons. But keep in mind that widespread is considered non-safe, and substantial, we're not where we really want to be yet. But we are in the red, and this would be typically be red, although it looks orange on the screen, it's really red. So what that means is that we can, once we're in red for 14 consecutive days, there's some privileges, if you will, as it relates to things that may be able to open up. For us, this trigger conversation, and let's go to the next slide, regarding our preschool. When are we going to open up our preschool? We moved from purple to red, and that was just today, and that was hot off the press hours ago. about our new status, but we need to be there for 14 days. And we're going to talk about that, or at least read about that a little later. Next slide. Now we get to move toward opening preschool. Now, although preschool is allowed to open up, which leaves a lot of us a little puzzled, in the purple, our most challenged status, we wanted to open up when we felt that it was safe. Being in the red and some semblance of a stable infection rate, really it kind of allow us to start to, again, to work with our labor union. We met with our two teacher union presidents today to start talking about what that means and when we might open preschool. And so we'll be having ongoing meetings about that in terms of our readiness. And we'd like to consider opening preschool sooner than later, and more to come on that in the near future. Next slide. Just a reminder, as shared back in July, we plan to reopen in phases. Our first phase is preschool in person. Preschool is more ready than most to open up. We did get an update today. We have 4 preschools, and we got a status of who's ready in terms of ready and willing to come back. In public schools with labor union, you need to have some agreement. And so we have identified 2 classes that may be ready to open sooner than later. We may not be opening all 4 at once. We may start opening up 2 at a time. When will we open up? That depends. And you know, with our attorneys over the last few decades, they have a very popular phrase called "it depends." And now we find ourselves saying "it depends," and it really does. Hence come the frustration, because it leaves us not knowing. Because things could pivot at any time. We could be on our way to opening a school, and then boom, the infection rates run rapid and they jump, and it causes us to walk it back. But we're hoping that this time around that we can open in the immediate future, but this will be discussed and planned with our bargaining unit members and determined very soon. But that would be phase 1. Phase 2, shortly after that, would be opening our elementary schools and before and after school in-person programs. And that's what we call phase 2. Phase 3 moves to our middle school, and phase 4, finally, our high school. And so that's our thinking in terms of as we're planning and have captured all the input from a number of key groups. And as we continue to have conversations with our bargaining unit members, I just wanted to remind the board and community, this is our phase process. Next slide. So again, when do we open up? And again, it depends. When do we move into the various phases? Again, it depends. And that's where the frustration comes throughout the country, throughout our state, and even in our region about when do we open up and in what phases. And that depends. And that's why we need to have the ongoing conversation with all of our stakeholders and then make a determination of when it's time to recommend to our board moving with phase 1, preschool, because that's the school we're going to open up first. And we're optimistic that we can do that sooner than later. So stay tuned for that. Next slide. In the meantime, we're talking about hubs. We have our mental health services where we want to have in person. We know our kids and families are suffering, many of them, due to trauma that's associated with this pandemic. We want to be able to provide in person, maybe in outdoors, some special ed services, face-to-face assessments and those kind of things. And we're looking at our intervention programs and we're looking at open outdoor space to do that. And so stay tuned for that. We're still having ongoing conversations, and we anticipate this will be up and running in the next couple of weeks. So please stay tuned. Next slide. Alameda County announcement. And I'm going to ask our school board students trustee, Audrey Mala, and our student board member trustee, Leo Carzo-Clark, if you'd be so kind to help us read these sections as we blow them up. And trustee Mala, if you can go first with taking the first 3 short paragraphs, and maybe Trustee Carzo Clark can pick up after that, if you don't mind. And here's
Sure. Alameda County, California. Last month, the state announced their color-coded 4-tier blueprint for a safer economy. Today, the state announced that Alameda County is in the red tier. This is a tier below purple and still reflects the substantial risk of COVID-19 in our county. While movement to the red tier allows for additional sectors to open with restrictions, local health officers can proceed more cautiously than the state allows. As with all other reopenings, it will be important for Alameda County to take measured and phased approach to avoid dramatic increases in disease transmission and reclosures. As we did when the blueprint for a safer economy was first announced, we are carefully examining the potential impact of activities that may be permitted to reopen or expand in the red tier. Could you scroll down a little, please? Thank you. Since the COVID-19 pandemic started, we have learned a lot more about the effectiveness of COVID-19 mitigation strategies like limiting mixing among different households and maintaining stable groups, consistent use of face coverings, physical distancing, good hand washing technique, and screening of symptoms and exposure.
We are using the next 2 weeks through October 6th to ensure our metrics remain stable, and we will release a phased plan that balances increased risk of spread of COVID-19 from newly permitted activities alongside appropriate mitigation strategies that can be implemented. At this time, there is no change to permitted or prohibited activities in Alameda County. Bringing students back for in-person learning is a top priority for the next phase of reopening. Though counties in the red tier are permitted to open schools for in-person learning after 2 weeks in the red tier, our health officer order issued on August 28th clarified that schools must continue distance learning until such a time that local conditions support in-person learning, even if the county meets the state's criteria for in-person learning. While an immediate return of all Alameda County K-12 students and school staff could potentially increase transmission of COVID-19, the impact of distance learning on both students' mental health and their ability to learn is clear. We know that educational inequities and the achievement gap are likely exacerbated by having children learning from home. We also know it is hardest for younger children to spend all day learning online. All Alameda County schools and school districts are urged to prioritize preparing for reopening and engaging parents and staff in the planning so that they can be ready. The Public Health Department and the County Office of Education have developed reopening guidance to help schools implement COVID-19 health and safety measures. As announced on September 2nd, Alameda County elementary school waivers are being received and reviewed. We will send applications to the state for their recommendation on a rolling basis. All Alameda County schools are encouraged to use state and locally permitted school-based small cohorts to provide targeted specialized services for students with special needs and English learners, access to internet and devices for distance learning, and in-person support for at-risk and high-need students. For the list of activities that are currently open and not open in Alameda County, visit covid19.ac.gov.org.
Thank you so much. I think it was really important that we share the announcement from Alameda County health officials. And so that we take a moment to review that. And so with that, Board President Trutain, that concludes the superintendent's report for this evening.
Thank you very much. I'm so thrilled that Alameda County has made it into the red tier. I appreciate everybody taking the precautions that allowed us to reach that, and am very excited about the next steps that we can take now. I have no report myself. I'll move to Vice President Duran.
Good evening, community. Just 2 items. One is, once again, a reminder to the choir that the census is closing on the 30th of this month at the end of September. So please reach out to people, distant cousins, whoever, and remind everyone to fill out their form. The second is an acknowledgement, and I just wanted to mention that I will be doing it ongoing, and that if any other board member wishes to also participate, you're welcome to. You just let me know and I'll let it be your turn. Tlatzocamati, gracias, and gratitude in recognition that Albany sits on the territory of the Huichin, the ancestral and unceded land of the Cechoni Ohlone. This land was and continues to be of great importance to the Ohlone people. We recognize that all of us in Albany continue to benefit from this land that we live and work on. That's it for me.
Thank you, Vice President Duran. Now we move to Trustee Clark.
Yeah, thank you, President Trutain. I'll keep it real brief. I just want to thank the students, parents, teachers, and the entire staff for doing such a great job during these trying times during distance learning. And hopefully we can get back to school as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Clark. Trustee Doss.
Yes, I had an opportunity to speak at a symposium a few days ago for the student board members, and I just thought it would be nice to mention that. It was a great opportunity to speak to student board members about their role and to also share my perspectives as a board member. And I just really enjoyed it, and so I thought I would, share that. And the second part of my report is the reopening of schools. I have seen firsthand the struggles with distance learning, and I hope that we all will do whatever we can to safely get students back in school. I often think about all of the experiences that I had as a elementary school student, middle school, and high school student, and those experiences can only happen if the students are in school in person and able to experience them. So I hope that we'll all push forward and do anything humanly possible to get the students safely back in front of their students and with their peers.
Thank you, Trustee Doss. Trustee Hinckley.
I'll just say a reminder that we will be able to vote soon, and that just a reminder for folks that this board unanimously endorsed Proposition 15, which would bring significant funding to local governments and school districts and community colleges in California. So remember to vote. Also, if you haven't seen them already, there are several forums you can watch recordings of that include the 3 candidates for school board, which I hope you will also vote for in November. So maybe we can figure out, or I'll figure out how to share links to that. But the League of Women Voters of Berkeley, Albany, and Emeryville hosted a forum, as did the teachers, and there may be others that people should look out for.
I think that we should be able to post links to those forums on the AUSD website homepage as a news item, so that everyone will have access to those recordings. Thank you very much for mentioning that. Also, I do note that there are 2 participants that have raised their hands. I would like to go ahead and let the student board members give their reports before we have public comment. So hang in there, keep your hands up, we'll get to you. Student board members, go ahead please with your reports.
All right, the Albany High School has started a weekly bulletin video to share important information to students and families. This bulletin is posted on the high school website each week at ahs.ausdk12.org. A chapter of the bipartisan nonprofit organization My School Votes is beginning efforts to help Albany high school students register and pre-register to vote. They'll be giving presentations during US history and US Gov classes. Register to vote at myschoolvotes.whenweallvote.org/Bay Area, or go to whenweallvote.org for more information. And if you couldn't catch that, it'll be in the minutes after the meeting.
And AHS leadership held a new student lunch for students who are new to the district to get to know each other through group bonding activities. And then at the middle school, there was a back to school night on Thursday, September 17th, where parents and families were able to meet teachers and learn more about distance learning in their students' virtual classroom. And then Marin Elementary has started a little free library. So 2 carts of books are under the bulletin boards near the office. And families can take a book, share a book, and pass it on. And the books are have their own mini quarantine for 3 days for safety, as a safety precaution.
Student board members, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the high school's back to school night is this Thursday. So high school parents should definitely tune in for that also.
Yes, thank you for adding that.
Okay. And that brings us to our agenda item number 10, persons to address the board on matters not on the agenda. I see we have 3 participants. Our first speaker will be Ms. Altman. Please go ahead with your comment.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name's Hilary Altman. I'm a new parent. We started last year in Albany. I first just want to praise the supportive, positive community. We really couldn't be happier with the education, the teachers, and now witnessing this collaborative board meeting. I feel very privileged to be a part of this community. I'm here tonight because I, as somebody new, don't know what the safety and security plan is. And I want to thank Trustee Hinckley and Trustee Doss for sending me information and responding to me so quickly. I went through that information and saw that the last time safety and security was brought up was March 2019 board meeting, and that it is supposed to be brought up on an annual basis. I understand the pandemic put that on hold, but as a new parent, I'm very interested in the safety protocols, specifically a question that was brought up in that March meeting in 2019 about prevention and mitigation plans, and what the safety enhancements might be and when they might be implemented. What a perfect time for us to implement any safety enhancements while there are no students in the schools. So I'm just hoping this can be brought up as a future agenda item, not for tonight, but when we can invite the full community to participate and be here for that. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Altman. And I will say that it is the responsibility of the board to check annually on the school safety plans. And so that should be agendized for this year. Our next speaker is A.D. Zeff. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is actually Jody Alperstein. Zoom has kind of taken up with my son's name there. So first, I'd just like to say thank you all. I know everybody's working really hard. And I want to talk a little bit about a document the Albany Disability Squad sent you all last night. And so I wanted to say that I'm very concerned that despite some of the improvements in comparison to the horrific spring, special education students are still suffering in a more significant way compared to the general population. Services aren't being delivered and progress is not being made towards goals. And this is all documented in the survey results that we sent you all last night. I have many concerns, but first and foremost at the moment is that my son currently does not have a teacher. My son currently does not have a case manager. And his education is being managed by the paraprofessionals who are doing their best, and I definitely appreciate them, but they're undertrained, they're overwhelmed, and they're not qualified. My program specialist has not responded to my emails, although my BUSD one has, and I'm sure they're equally swamped. So while my son does need an assessment, he also needs an education. And so I heard Dr. Wells say that we're thinking about providing assessments in person, which I greatly appreciate. I am going to still urge you to have a plan that provides education to these students in person as soon as possible. I heard earlier that as of September 2nd, you are allowed to start asking for these waivers. I did not hear any mention that you actually have. And so I want to make sure that we're getting individualized and meaningful education for our students. Thank you.
President Tutain?
Go ahead.
I think this warrants a response, and I really appreciate the parent. This is just heartbreaking. We had at the last minute an emergency where a teacher had to go out, and I can't get into the detail, on an emergency basis, almost life and death. And tonight, you guys approved us hiring a teacher to fill in immediately with the consent calendar. So we thank you for that. And we should have an update for the parent tomorrow, and there should have been updates throughout. But this has been like the #1 issue in the district when the teacher went out suddenly and not even the teacher saw it coming. And so this was a 911 and wanted the board to know that.
Thank you, Dr. Wells. The speaker also made a comment about associating the need for a waiver with the possibility of bringing some small groups of special ed students back onto campus. Can you clarify that, please? Is a waiver necessary for hubs?
No waiver is necessary. We have that in motion. We're going to have, in some cases, in face-to-face assessments where needed, and we're looking at using some outdoor spaces to do that as well. So we're moving forward with that, but there is no waiver needed for hubs or any of our interventions groups or special ed services that we put under the hub. So we can move with that immediately. There is no waiver required for that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wells. I see that one of our trustees has their hand up. Trustee Clark, would you like to speak?
Yeah, thank you, President Tutain. I just left something out of my board report. I just wanted to mention it real briefly. That last week I watched the League of Women's Voters Forum for our Albany School Board candidates and the Albany City Council. And all of our candidates seemed excellent to me. And I want to thank them for stepping up and being willing to serve our community. And I would encourage our community to learn more about the candidates for both bodies and to please cast your votes. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Clark. Sorry that I didn't pick that up earlier. I appreciate you being patient. Okay. We now move to item 11 on our agenda. Actually, this is 11-1, Diversifier Narrative. Our students brought this to the board first at our second meeting in August. This is coming back in front of the board so that we can see what the process will be going forward. Dr. Wells, do you want to introduce?
Oh, absolutely. This is a initiative that was created and generated by our students. And it was a much needed initiative as they begin to diversify the narrative as it's spelled out and begin to encourage and in many cases demand that we take a look at our current curriculum, making sure it's diverse, and that not only that we use diverse material, that we also have the training and the skill set and the ongoing development to implement with the highest level of fidelity. And so tonight, our Assistant Superintendent, Marie Williams, will give us an update on the process, where we are and where we're going. So at this time, I turn it over to our own superintendent, Assistant Superintendent Marie Williams.
Thank you, Superintendent Wells. Good evening, Board President Trutain, board members and community, and to our students. Thank you very much for bringing this topic to our attention and giving us an opportunity to work together collaboratively on implementing solutions. I certainly do appreciate and acknowledge your insight and your advocacy and your proactive energy around this topic. So as Dr. Wells said, there are sort of two parts to the presentation tonight. I am going to be speaking about in a few moments some of the some steps we will be outlining around the timeline specifically for this item, but also wanted to take the opportunity to highlight some of the other actions that are taking place in the district right now around dismantling systems of racism, oppression, and white supremacy, and creating affirming environments for all of our students. But we do have with us this evening Jessica Rhodey, who is the department chair for English at Albany High School. And a couple meetings ago, she did provide some public comment and had prepared a presentation that this evening we wanted to give her an opportunity to speak to. So Julie, if you can pull up the presentation, and I believe Mrs. Rhodey is right here on the call. So I will turn it over to Jessica, and then when she is concluded, then I'll talk just a little bit about our next steps. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I also believe that Mary Flo Hudson had a couple of slides at the end of this that she also wanted to share. So if we can add her as well, that would be lovely.
Yes, I've done so. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Jessica Rhodey, formerly Jessica Park. I've been in the district for 10 years now. This is my 10th year here. I have been the department chair for, gosh, since 2016, the end of 2016, maybe early 2017. And I'd like to reiterate that in the past 10 years, our English department has changed a lot in terms of its makeup, in terms of the teachers who are now very willing to collaborate and talk about how to diversify our book room and our curriculum. So I just wanted to say that to begin with, and I also want to give Ms. Hudson a chance to introduce herself before I talk about the English department, and then she'll add on a little bit about the social studies department at the end.
Thanks, Jessica. I'm Mary Flo Hudson. I am a longtime teacher at the high school, but this is my first year as department chair of the social studies department. And I'm very excited about this movement in general and pleased to speak with you tonight and appreciate Marie Williams' support in moving us forward to the place that we are today.
Definitely. A lot of these past initiatives that we're going to be talking about in our initiative this year couldn't have happened without the support of Assistant Superintendent Williams, and so we do really appreciate her. Can we move on to the next slide, please? I also want to reiterate that our purpose here is to support the Diversify Our Narrative initiative and to take this conversation from something that might be a little bit more idealistic and maybe the bare bones or an outline to something where we can talk about how do we actually implement their requests or their demands, however we say that. In order to do that, I just want to make sure that we all have the same context of how our English courses work at our high school. This table just lays out some of the basics about each of our grade levels. Each of our classes, 9 through 11, are literature focused. There is a particular focus within the literature we read. In 10th grade, it's world literature. In 11th grade, it's American literature. And then there's a literary focus as well. So 9th grade, we focus on characterization to pair with identity, health, and society, which is their social studies class. In 10th grade, we help them to develop themes more carefully. And in 11th grade, we're really diving into rhetorical analysis and new criticism. And 12th grade, it depends on whether students decide to take a genre elective and composition class, or if they decide to go the AP Lit route. So there's kind of a variety of choices that our seniors have. In addition to books that we teach, we also provide students research foundations, writing foundations across multiple types of writing styles, and we help them to develop communication skills. I'm saying this to say that we only have 180 days a school year. Actually, in terms of the number of books that we get through as a whole class in each of these grade levels, in general, our standard units, we only have about 6 of them per year, and some of those units are research units. Some of those units, most of those units are literature units based around a whole text. And so when Diversifier Narratives is asking for 2 texts a year to be read with a class, that's 1/3 of the units that we are doing in that year. So I just wanted to lay that out as a basic idea. As we're picking those novels, can we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. As we're moving to the next, as we're choosing novels as English teachers, we tend to think a lot about which novels do we choose if we only have 5 that we're reading as a whole class. We do have other supplementary text, poems, excerpts, independent reading that we give students where there's a lot more freedom to add in those diverse voices. But this is just a smattering of the questions that we consider as English teachers of what does this particular novel add? So one of the big categories is voice. Is this a new voice that students may not have seen before? Is it an important voice historically or because of the moment that we're in? How relatable is this text to students? All of that. Text complexity has to do with our understanding of where students are in terms of their age and their skill set, and also if the situations that characters are going through in the literature that we read are complex enough to have deep, enriching discussions in class. And then accessibility, I will cover more deeply later, but one of the key questions is, are there enough copies of this book for me to give out to all of my students in my classes? And then part of this is, will students be able to understand this? Is this text too mature for, say, 9th graders? Is it the appropriate length? A 900-page book would take a very long time to get through as a whole class. We tend to prefer books around 250 pages to 300 pages, just so we can get more of those shorter texts into our curriculum. Unsurprisingly, this is very difficult to find a book that really matches all of these pieces that we're looking for. We think that the books that we're currently using do a lot of this. Are they all perfect? Absolutely not. And so I just wanted to say that out loud. My next 2 slides are about strides that we've already made. So I've already mentioned that we have a really great group of collaborative teachers in our English department. We've been talking recently in the past year about how do we align some of these topics between our courses, and how do we have similar through lines in our courses, and we're naming them so that way new teachers who are coming in also know that they should be teaching these things. And so all current teachers will teach texts by and about BIPOC authors and other minority groups. These might not be the full novel length text, these might be excerpts, but everybody is attempting to teach a diverse set of texts. All 10th grade world literature teachers are using world texts, and they're specifically discussing dehumanization, colonialization, and systemic oppression through those texts. All 11th grade US literature teachers are teaching at least one novel length text by a Black author, an American Black author, and address anti-Black racism in the United States. We also use research units as a means to explore sociopolitical issues, including environmental racism, policing in America, our criminal justice system. Most of those research units are not based around a novel, but are based around students researching current events and studies, that kind of thing. And then lastly, this will lead us into our next slide, but in 2017, we piloted new texts for our classes. And I want to talk a little bit about the specifics of this book pilot. This was something that we had talked about for years, but it always fell to the back burner before the 2017 year. And that Instagram incident pushed us to, and actually Michael Brown and Between the World and Me and all of the racial incidents in America that were happening in 2015 kind of pushed us into this moment where we decided we need to actually update our book room. So this is why the book pilot happened in 2017. So on our next slide, we piloted 20 books, or we asked to pilot 20 books that year. We did not buy class sets of all 20 of those titles. We had to kind of pick and choose based on our budget situation. And so there are 7 texts that are integrated into our curriculum. And what I mean by integrated is that either multiple teachers are teaching this book to their classes. So multiple US lit teachers, American lit teachers are teaching Between the World and Me and The Color Purple, and they've been teaching it year after year. There are some of these texts that are taught by one class, but they've also been taught year after year. So that includes The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, and we use Out on the Wire in our EdSec courses since we've bought it. 5 of these texts have been sporadically included, meaning one teacher has taught it a few times, or a couple of different teachers have attempted to put these texts into the curriculum, but it hasn't really stuck. It hasn't become a key part of the year. And so they're available, but they tend to not be the first text that teachers pick up for a variety of reasons. And each of these 5 titles I could talk about individually, but I won't for the sake of time. The last 8 were approved, but we did not buy class sets of them, which makes them very difficult to use in a whole class setting. We've used the best we could do in lit circles. I've used Kindred as AP Lit summer homework. We've used excerpts of these texts. We've given them out as independent reading texts, but they just, we didn't have the copies, so they're hard to incorporate as a whole class text. In general, I think that this is relatively successful in terms of a book pilot. I'll talk more about this in a second. Next slide, please. On this slide, I want to address some misconceptions or some disconnects that we had from the last time we presented about Diversifier Narratives. One of our trustees asked, how are these books that were piloted implemented? And there seemed to be a misunderstanding of how our book room operates. We don't actually have enough copies of every title that's approved to teach all of our classes. So if we're teaching Beloved, we don't have 400 copies of Beloved to cover all of our junior classes at the same time. We English teachers talk amongst ourselves, and we have to decide when in the school year we're teaching each text, so that way we can share books between students. And every summer, as we're replenishing books that have been lost and as we're looking to buy new copies, I get the very difficult job of deciding how do we spend what money that we have in order to either replenish texts, to buy new sets of books that teachers might want to teach. And even if a novel costs much less than a textbook, buying 90 copies to cover, say, Mr. Krasetz's 3 sections of English 1, technically he has 4, so 120 copies of English 1 is a lot of money if you do the multiplication there. New teachers are instructed to choose class novels from these approved lists and from these books that we have in the book room and how many books we have available to our students. And so they're limited by these traditional numbers that we have. We have so many copies of The Scarlet Letter and of The Great Gatsby and of Moby Dick in our book room that we don't use really. But because those have been taught for 30, 40 years, we just have the copies of those books. Whereas newer books, we've been kind of scrounging together class sets here and there. I'm also going to mention this later, but it always feels like we're playing a little bit of a zero-sum game with our budget and public education. And often it feels more important to make sure that our class sizes are small, that all of our programs are funded, more so than having these new books that we want to teach. Because if we're weighing it, we can supplement the books that we have. We can make do with what we already have. Would we like new texts? Would we like more diverse texts? Absolutely, but often we're playing this game where we want to make sure that we have enough teachers in all of our classrooms, that we have fully funded programs. So we're also making that judgment. Next slide, please. All right, so acknowledged growth areas. I said before to Mr. Doss that I didn't want to just show what we're already doing well. I know that there's a lot of growth that we have to do to increase the diversity of our course curriculum and also to make sure that all of our students are supported. Our 9th grade texts have been static for over a decade. This is actually a group that's hard to find texts for because they sit in this wide spectrum of maturity. And so we have some students that are really ready for harder texts with mature themes. And we have another group of students who are really not ready for it in their 9th grade year. And so it's been hard to find new texts there, but we do need more diverse voices and we need more modern texts. World literature texts, we've kvetched as a department every year that our 10th grade world literature texts happen to be very depressing and dark because they focus on oppression and trauma of Black and Indigenous people of color and Jewish people in Nazi Germany. And it just ends up being dark book after book after book. And so we need some uplifting narratives if we can find them. And same goes for books about the Black experience in America in US literature as well. There tends to be a single story about oppression with Black authors that gets published every year. And they tend to be similar stories. So can we find other diverse voices within that subcategory of American authors? We should. I also just want to acknowledge we need more narratives by and about Asians, modern Indigenous people of color, LGBTQ folks, people with disabilities. We don't have enough texts that represent our student population. We have a truly diverse student population, and we need to find authors and texts that have stories about these people as well. My next slide is about systemic factors. I would love it if my department alone could solve racism. That would be lovely. But I don't think that that's going to happen realistically. And so I just want to acknowledge that also the publishing industry is reckoning with their own systemic racism. I have a little excerpt from Minor Feelings by Kathy Park Hong, where she talks about how Jhumpa Lahiri's stories are often considered the template of Asian American ethnic fiction. And she talks about how this is a problem in the publishing industry who, because they position her books and they market her books as a single story on Asian American immigrant life. And the same thing happens with Latinx text, where Sandra Cisneros' House on Mango Street is the sole single story text on Latinx experience in America. And same thing you could say with Toni Morrison and Beloved and the Black experience. So that's not necessarily true, but the publishing industry is also publishing more texts by diverse authors. And so even the text that we piloted in 2017, there are more titles that we would love to pilot that just hadn't been written at that point in time that we've read since that we would love to continue to pilot. I'll talk more about that in a second. The second one is a little bit of an Ouroboros, where we teachers don't know what texts work in a whole class environment until we attempt to teach them. And then we can't actually teach anything unless we purchase a class set of these texts. And so it feels like this chicken and an egg problem, where we would love to say we definitely want this book and we will teach it for 10 years and we would love to give you that promise, but often we don't know that until we get that book in front of kids. And then lastly, we just want to acknowledge that teaching new texts requires a greater investment of time and effort from teachers. I could, with my eyes closed, find 10 lessons on The Great Gatsby, on a single chapter of The Great Gatsby by Googling. Can I find the same level of lesson plan for, say, Purple Hibiscus? No, and so we're creating a lot of that curriculum ourselves. We're co-creating it together as a department, and so it just takes longer to build this curriculum. I believe I'm on my last slide before I hand it off to Ms. Mary Flo, who has a much shorter set of slides. This year, we asked Superintendent Williams, Assistant Superintendent Williams, excuse me, to pilot additional texts. We have purchased many of these texts, and there's a couple in here that have been gifted, and there's one text in here that was added after we made that initial purchase, and so we'd eventually like to pilot this text as well. But this is the titles across the bottom of this slide are the texts that we would like to implement and try in our curriculum to see if they stick and to see if they're a text that can be incorporated into our curriculum. One way that the school board and our school district can help our high school and our middle school and our elementary schools to really meet the demands of Diversifier Narrative is to establish clear ongoing funding to pilot these new titles as new titles come out. As we read more and we want to try more, it's sometimes hard to ask year after year for new money. And so if we know that there's some funding set aside for this initiative, it helps us to make those choices about what we want to pilot this year and have those conversations to know that that's available to us. And that's it from me. Ms. Hudson, do you want to talk through your few slides?
Sure. Thank you, Jessica. If you could, okay. Thank you. So last summer, the Social Studies Department met and we read through the Diversifier Narrative petition and the work that went on it, both the local and the national movement is just super exciting to us. And so we wanted to draft a statement in support of it. So we wrote that we wholeheartedly support the goals of the Diversifier Narrative movement. We currently include many different voices and experiences in our curriculum and strive to include more. We look forward to adding new and longer text and additional voices this year. We are committed to anti-racist teaching and ending white supremacy. That's the whole slide, please. So we have themes too in our 4 classes, and race and identity develop in a sequence over all 4 years. And we seek each year to provide our students with a mirror of their own reflection in things that we read and study, and also a window into new perspectives and other identities and the ways other people engage in the world. So these are just the themes from those 4 classes. But next slide, please. So this summer, we were super excited to work with Assistant Superintendent Marie Williams on ordering these new books to pilot. And all the things that Jessica mentioned about books in English apply to books in US history as well. Some of these books will be read as excerpts and some will be read as whole text. The 9th grade IHS classes have already started reading excerpts, So You Want to Talk About Race this week. So that's pretty exciting. My US history students will be picking up Stamped on Friday. So also a shout out to Ms. Pat Pope in the book room and Michelle Elsheim, Assistant Principal Michelle Elsheim, for making that happen this week. The turnaround on books has just been amazing. So my US history students will read 4 of these books cover to cover. And I have sort of an advantage there that I only have 1 class of US history. So having 35 books in the book room allows me to read the whole text and prepare for that 1 class. So, and then other people are interested in reading different things, but it'll probably be more excerpt reading because of that barrier of not having a full class set. Most people don't teach one period. Most people teach 2 or 3 or 4 periods of any given topic. Next slide, please. So with that, our request sounds very similar to Mrs. Rhodey's, that this summer we were able to purchase 5 to 35 copies of these 8 books to pilot. If we were to teach them to a whole class, we would need about 100 of each text. So hopefully we'll see how the pilots go this year and what people want to continue teaching in the future, and that we would like to come back to the school board and request more funds at that time. In addition, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the age of our textbooks in our courses. Our US history textbook is from 1999. Most of our other textbooks are older than our students. We do need contemporary textbooks that address contemporary issues. Even though we're studying history, a large part of it, it's the perspective and the angle and the narrative that the textbook authors have chosen to put forward. We all supplement the heck out of our textbooks, but it would be really nice, especially in this day and age where kids are learning from home, it'd be really nice if they had a physical book in their hand instead of so much online. So I just wanted to acknowledge that I will be back. So thank you again for having us, and thank you to the students on the Diversifier Narrative committee. I think this is super exciting day for Albany High, and I'm looking forward to reading these books myself. I haven't read all of them, but and then reading them with my students as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Rhodey, and also Ms. Hudson. Lots of really exciting books on all of the lists that you've shared. When I was a principal at the high school, I always used to say to my department chairs that my favorite answer is yes. And so it's been really nice to be able to support your efforts to date. And I do look forward to continuing. We do look forward to continuing to support your efforts to provide diverse text to students. And Ms. Hudson, I would just say I would be really excited to talk to you offline about refreshing your textbook that is very old. So I look forward to having that conversation. So just we have just a little bit of time left. And so I just wanted to highlight a couple of things, and then I wanted to give the board and maybe even our students an opportunity to chat, or maybe our community to ask questions. So moving this initiative forward this year, TK through 12, will look similar to sort of a pilot, a novel pilot process, right? So in the backup, I just detailed that sort of where we are right now in September of 2020, we would be sort of inventorying the current status of our titles. So that is sort of both the quantities of the text that we have, as well as the titles that are available to us and on hand. And from there, we would want to determine what texts we need to procure in order to continue piloting throughout the fall and late spring. We do like to bring texts to the board for approval around April time, so that then we can purchase any new titles to be available starting on July 1st for implementation in the 2021-2022 school year. And so we will be in pretty short order reaching out to our elementary colleagues as well as our middle school colleagues to engage them in this really exciting conversation around diversifying the literature in our schools. But the other thing I wanted to highlight, and I think the students really spoke to this really eloquently on August the 25th when they brought this request forward. It's really important, I think, that we sort of think about all of the other pieces that we need to be attending to in order to maintain anti-racist and affirming spaces for our students. So I think certainly a part of that is providing students, all students, with texts that reflect the experiences of Black, Indigenous, and other folks of color. I think in addition to that, and I'm really excited actually about this work that we've been doing really with great vigor, I think sort of starting this year, is around providing ongoing professional development to our staff to learn together collaboratively about anti-racist teaching practices. I think that's as important as ensuring that students have the books in their hand. We want to make sure that when students are experiencing those books in the classroom, they're experiencing them in a way, again, that is affirming for them, and that we provide teacher support to be able to implement that curriculum effectively. And so over the summer, well, in fact, going all the way back to June, Dr. Wells actually sort of ended our school year in light of the murder of George Floyd with a conversation where we began to talk about race. And since then, we've had some other opportunities to engage our staff, both in the summer and then right before the start of school, talking about how we can implement anti-racist practices in our classroom. And we have a session coming up next month with our staff to continue this conversation. And we also are going to be engaging in some sort of group discussion type activities around this work that many people are interested in. So I'm really excited about this element of professional development that I think will really help us move this anti-racist work forward in our community. I also wanted to touch on just a couple other items. So we do currently allocate dollars to each of our sites out of restricted lottery funds. Annually, we allocate about $80,000. And so we are committed this year and moving forward to increase that allocation. So the question came by how much? And I haven't yet even had an opportunity to talk to principals about this. So I want to say that we will be communicating with our principals about increasing for each of their sites the allocation that would be used specifically. So restricted lottery funds can only be used for instructional materials. And so these dollars would definitely go to supporting this movement around increasing the diversity of the text that students experience at school. And then the last two things I just want to talk about as also elements of our district's move toward implementing anti-racist and equitable learning environments for all students are around, just a little bit ago, we had a special workshop around the broad goals that were sort of raised by Albany coming together. And I know that that conversation is ongoing, as well as Superintendent Wells recently convened an academic achievement task force, of which our own Trustee Doss is chair. And a key focus area for that work is around implementing a continuous cycle of improvement and increasing equitable learning outcomes for all students. I also did want to sort of note that a couple other items the students brought up, and I'll say this in closing, a couple of the other items students brought up in terms of sort of next steps, right? So diversifying our narrative, that's sort of step one, and then there's more. We want more, and I agree, right? So the other steps that the students talked about were around making ethnic studies a required course, and then also recruiting and retaining a diverse teaching staff. And so I just want to continue to sort of bring these goals to our attention, sort of, because I think we really realize that equity work is not a checklist, it's not time-bound, it doesn't have a start and end, right? Our district's fight for racial justice is ongoing, and we must be engaged in this work in an ongoing way. And there's not one or two things, there are many things that are sort of happening in concert with one another. And so I just wanted to sort of be able to highlight those things that are happening now and that we will continue to implement in the future. So that is the conclusion of this staff report. I look forward to bringing this conversation back to the board as many times as you would like. And with just a few moments that are left, I would invite you if you have any questions or any discussion. Thank you.
President Trutain, I would like to kind of highlight a couple of things. It was clear to me in our students' demand that there are a couple of things. One, although we have core textbooks, many of them are outdated, which need to be addressed yesterday. And although we acknowledge we have some supplemental materials, it's crystal clear we don't have near enough. And so with my staff and I, we're going to put our heads together to try to figure out how to identify funds to address a curriculum that's current and relevant so that our kids get the best possible opportunity to have an ideal curriculum. And so we're going to grapple with that, and we move in with quick speed. But we are going to ask our stakeholders to engage us, I think, in the process of how we do this. But I just wanted to let you know that we heard our students. In addition to that, our students said it's not enough just to give our teachers the curriculum and textbooks and supplemental, but it's also critically important, as Assistant Superintendent Williams mentioned, that we provide our teachers with the training and the support so that the curriculum can be implemented at the highest level of fidelity. And so this is something that's on our plate. It's one of our major priorities, and it's something that we can't wait for. And so we applaud our students in their demand, and they're fighting a fight that people would call, at least John Lewis would call, engaging in good trouble. And so that's the kind of trouble youth, I think, needs to be in. And so I'm just so proud of our young folks and what they have done to promote good things, so that although they may benefit a bit, but those who come behind them will benefit greatly. But this is going to be a tall order that we are excited about trying to tackle, but I don't think we can do it by ourselves.
Thank you, Dr. Wells and Assistant Superintendent Marie Williams and Ms. Rhodey and Ms. Hudson. This has been great. I do see that we have a student member of Diversifier Narrative here as an attendee, and I'd like to give Ms. Ueda Hale a chance to speak in just a second. You know, I just wanted to sort of summarize that I hear what the teachers are saying, that we have some funds for this, and those have been used and used effectively, but not feeling like we have enough to really give this the push that it deserves. And I do know, because I've been on the board for a while, that, you know, every year we have to certify that we have sufficient instructional materials. And according to the law of California, we do have adequate instructional materials, but we don't want adequate. We want to move things to the next level. We really want to do some progressive work here in Albany. And when I read this agenda item, the first thing I wanted to do was to pull out my checkbook and buy a class set of books. And I still want to do that. So I heard what you were hinting at, Dr. Wells, that you want to maybe ask the community, and, you know, we have adequate curricular materials. We're not, you know, we're in that lucky position, but I really want to try to jumpstart this effort. I want to try to participate and be a part of a major effort to do all that we can. So I would be happy to work with the students in trying to get something together that we could send out to the community, and just to ask those who want to be a part of this if they could.
President Trutain, I'd like for you to be a leader in this process, and I would offer you the opportunity to consider donating $300 for a class set.
I will. I'll do that. Let's turn it over to Ms. Ueda Hale, if she would like to speak on behalf of the students.
Yeah, thank you so much. First off, Dawn really just wants to thank all the English teachers and just the teachers in the district who have supported this campaign and are taking steps to make change within their own classrooms already. And we completely support this push from the high school English and social studies departments, but we also really want to stress the importance of big steps similar to these being taken at all grade levels. Often we feel that the younger grade levels in our district don't get as much attention when it comes to diversifying literature and pushing anti-racist teaching. So we want to highlight the importance of this kind of education starting from a young age. And we really want to emphasize that we want to work directly with the teachers and the school board towards a shared common goal, one that Dawn genuinely believes will benefit the collective community of Albany. And in an attempt to create this open collaboration, we are currently meeting with faculty and gathering teacher feedback as to get authentic and honest teacher perspectives. And we'd also just like to make it very clear that our campaign is only one step in the process of bettering our schools and community, just like it was mentioned before. And we cannot take this one step and then be satisfied. There really must be a resolute and unwavering commitment for the long term. And from my personal experience as a mixed race woman who is Black, Japanese American, and German Jewish, I cannot say that I have always felt safe or represented in Albany, but when I have been in a classroom that has openly acknowledged all different perspectives and identities, it has felt like a sense of confirmation that my identity, cultures, and voice is valid, which is an invaluable experience. And I'm hopeful that in the future, when changes are implemented, BIPOC students will graduate and be able to look back on their time in AUSD with gratitude, because they were finally seen and welcomed just the way they are. So thank you so much. Dawn just really wants to extend their appreciation, and we are extremely excited to work with you in the future.
Thank you, Ms. Ueda Hill. Thank you for being here. I want to move it to the board for questions or comments. We have, let's see.
I'll go ahead first since no one else jumped in yet. I'm really excited by the momentum, by the movement, by the enthusiasm that I feel is in the room, so to speak. And there are some very specific kinds of questions and comments that I think I'll just send to you, Jessica, and to Mary Flo. Since so as not to take the time here, I have a couple of issues I want to discuss, and I think I'll just narrow it to basically 2 comments. Julie, would you be able to pull up the slide? So I'm really excited about what's happening in Albany High School, both in terms of the English department and the social studies department. And I know the social studies teacher had come to us before and spoke to, I think last year. So things are progressing along. I wanted to share just a slide with you. It's more food for thought. And I'll just make one other comment right now while we're waiting, which is that, oh, here it is. Yeah. It's just, I want to put it here. I didn't want to just read it to folks because you have to really look at it and absorb this and really think about it and put yourself in the shoes of others. That white privilege is your history being part of the core curriculum and mine being taught as an elective. And this quote spoke specifically to ethnic studies, but you know, it can be taken across the board. It can be taken all the way to TK, as our student just mentioned. This is something that really needs to begin with the little kids and go up through high school. So please, I hope everybody will take this to heart and interpret it in a way that will be useful going forward. And the other part that the other comment that I just wanted to make is I know, Jessica, you had mentioned about the difficulty of finding materials in 10th grade history that are more uplifting. But, you know, I think there's another perspective in the sense that first, that's the reality of what US history has been in many cases. And the other, I would say, is that what we do see and know is survival of people of color throughout the history of US. And I take it to maybe more positive level, which is resilience and resistance. And I think those are key issues that speak to people of color and why we continue to survive and thrive in spite of all the obstacles. So I just want to thank you, though, and Mary Flo for addressing these important issues and moving all this forward here in Albany. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Durand. Let's move to Trustee Hinckley.
Yeah, I will echo all of the sentiments that both Zora and Vice President Durand mentioned, that it's really exciting that the students have brought us to this moment. I would really like to see a similar discussion around the middle school and the elementary school. My kid, when he was in 4th grade, had a teacher who talked with them all year long about police brutality against Black people in our country. And it was an incredibly rich way to engage with a 4th grader, and, you know, can be done at any age if a teacher is equipped to do that. So it'd be great to see a similar presentation from elementary and middle school and maybe lift up some of the same concerns that Jessica and Mary Flo brought tonight, which is that they are feeling a resource constraint here, and that is something the board can perhaps discuss. So I think the other way it would be good to see this come back is, as our discussion of instructional materials happens, we grapple not just with this sort of resources around new books, but also around this textbook question, because I think that is a bigger issue, partly because textbooks are just insanely expensive. So it's a big choice to shift. But it really does you know, speaking to Vice President Duron's quote, it really does speak to the students that there's one thing in your textbook, but then we have to give you all these materials to supplement. So I'd love to see us have another conversation about what that would entail and maybe how we might prioritize certain classes or topics, because it doesn't seem feasible to me financially to overhaul that all in a year, but it certainly seems like it should be of equal priority as the sort of individual novels that we've been discussing so far. So thanks again to everybody who brought this forward. Yeah, we should all be making a lot of trouble right now. So thanks for modeling that.
Thank you, Trustee Hinckley. Trustee Doss or Trustee Clark, would you like to comment on this item?
I can be real brief. I got a chance to speak with the students in length. We set up some time. We were able to talk, and I had an opportunity to really hear what they had to say, and so I'm really excited about this, and I'm glad that we're able to talk about it and support this as we move forward. I did want to ask a question about and get more clarification around the teachers getting to decide which texts, and that if I get a little bit more clarification around that, just to make sure I have a clear understanding as to what you meant by that.
Do you mean at different grade levels? How do teachers choose which text they teach in an English course?
Correct.
So we have a list of approved books that have been approved by various iterations of the school board through history. And part of that list also has a number, how many copies of that book we have in our current book room. And that list is broken up by grade level. And so based off of that second slide, all of our, let's start with 11th and move down. All of our 11th grade texts are US literature texts. So they're all books by American authors. And we tell new teachers that out of this list, there are two types of books that need to be included in those 5 or 6 texts that you teach throughout the year. One of them has to be a book by a Black author that you use to teach about anti-Black racism. And then the second text in American literature that you have to teach is something that is structured in a postmodern way with a non-linear structure to it. And so many teachers use Beloved to cover both of those, to check off both of those items. Some teachers will use Things Fall Apart as that second postmodern text. And then there's a list of other texts that have been used in American literature that they'll use. And then same thing for 10th grade, which is world literature. So this includes British authors, authors from Nigeria, Asian authors. It's also hard to find works in translation and information about works in translation. And so that's another issue with 10th grade literature. And so there's a list of texts that we have there. And then we have one singular core text that every 10th grade teacher teaches, which is Night by Elie Wiesel. And then teachers generally are aligned about the other four-ish texts that they use. Most teachers will teach, in addition to Night, they'll teach Things Fall Apart, Lord of the Flies, Othello, and the last one is kind of, it might be Persepolis, it might be Purple Hibiscus, it might be something else. So there's a little bit of teacher choice involved with English, partially because the curriculum is so emotional. It's hard to teach a book that we teachers don't have a connection to. And so we've tended to give our English teachers a little bit more freedom in terms of the title choice. And we've been recently saying more, we would like to see these types of things in the literature that you're teaching. But we're required to provide students with a text. And so they need to choose off of the list of texts that we have for students. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, that definitely answers the question. I just was thinking about that in terms of, maximizing what we're talking about here today, that,
Yeah.
like taking a close look at that and making sure, like I said, just making sure that we take a close look at that as we, have these discussions, because if we buy all these books and have all these things in place, but then they're not the text that are actually being selected to be taught, then it doesn't really maximize what we're trying to do here. So I just thought it was worth clarification. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other board comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to first thank the board for being so receptive to this, and then also thank the teachers just for not just on this item specifically, but just for the last 3+ years of my high school experience, knowing that the teachers truly do care about this, and they're, this wasn't a presentation that they just put together for tonight, but it's an ongoing process that we as students see happening, and it's great that Dawn can work together with them. So thank you.
Okay, I'd like to open it up to public comment on this item. So if you're an attendee and you would like to speak to this, please raise your hand. Sorry, I did see that there was a hand raised earlier in the presentation, but if you do want to speak, you can raise your hand again at this time. Go. Yes, we do have at least one speaker. So Ms. Thies, if you want to go ahead, you have the floor. We might have some technical difficulty. Let's hang on.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So I wanted to convey my incredible respect for our student board members. I can't tell you how impressed I am as a parent and an education advocate with the work that you're doing. It just gives me so much hope at a difficult time in this country that there are young people like you doing this work. And then I just wanted to ask a question, and it's of course related to disability, which is that are any of these texts representative of the experience of people with disabilities, people of color with disabilities? And I don't know the answer, but I'd love to learn more. Thanks.
Thank you. I think that definitely needs to be considered as we talk about purchasing novels. We have another speaker. Ms. Rye, please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name is Rye Alley. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm part of the Diversifier Narrative team. First of all, I just want to thank you all so much for being here today and listening and actually showing a lot of interest in this, because I know it's really important to the Dawn team. And I just want to start by saying that some of what has already been said, just that this issue is so important also in younger grade levels. And I want to share with you an experience I had earlier this week. Through my EdSet program, I'm volunteering in a second grade classroom. And this week we were reading a book with a family with 2 moms, and they were mixed race and they'd adopted children. And the whole class was talking about how, you know, the neighbors were looking at them differently, and why do we think that is? So I just want to say that this is something that can be taught at a young level, and there are definitely books out there and ways to do it. And I know sometimes it seems like it's too young of an age to start this education at, but I think it is not, and it's very important to start at this age level in order to create an anti-racist Albany. So I just wanted to share that experience and say that myself and the Dawn team are totally willing to work with teachers to figure out how to teach this, because I know it's difficult, but it's really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Rye. Appreciate your comment. Okay. I'd like to move on our agenda to our action items. We have item 12-1 coming up first, which is a resolution number 2020-21-05, our National Hispanic Heritage Month acknowledgement. I'd like to turn this over to Vice President Duran, and I also think that Vice President Duran has some guest speakers lined up.
Yes, if Julie could add our speakers to be panelists at this time. And I would just like to start by saying that we are in celebration mode, right? We celebrate diversity all the time. We respect diversity. And tonight we have two students. I'm proud to present two students from Albany High School, Ana Yancy Quintero and Joaquin Rubio Miranda, as well as Teresa Munoz, who are going to be reading both the background information as well as the resolution. So if you could get started now, thank you. You have to unmute yourselves.
Hi, my name is Joaquin Rubio, and I'm a sophomore at Albany High School, and I'm a proud Chicano. I want to thank all the school board members, and the particular Vice President Clementina Doron and Superintendent Wells. My ethnic studies teacher, Ms. Polido, for making our classes exciting. Also, Familias Latinas de Albany that have made our presence as Latinos both in school and in the community significant. For far too long, the history and achievements of our people of color in
just 1 minute, Joaquin. Ana Yancy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Hello, I'm Ana Yancy Quintero. I am Joaquin's cousin. I'm in the 11th grade, and I am also a proud Mexicana and Chicana.
And I'm Teresa Munoz, and I want to talk about the purpose of our presentation. So the purpose of this item is for the Board of Trustees to review and approve resolution number 2020-21-05, National Hispanic Heritage Month, September 15th through October 15th, 2020.
For far too long, the history and achievements of our people of color in the United States have been overlooked in our textbooks, the media, and the society as a whole. While the federal government now provides monthly recognitions as a way to address this, it is crucial to reflect on perhaps a deeper meaning. That is, diversity is an integral part of our part of the fabric of the United States, and these acknowledgements provide a way to celebrate and honor the richness of diverse cultures of this country. It is important to respect and honor our differences that collectively make up American history. Moreover, it is imperative to note that marginalized groups, including the diverse Latinx population, have not received equitable treatment in the United States. Today, it is incumbent that we acknowledge this fact so we can make these corrections in a relevant way. These recognitions provide us with an opportunity to ask ourselves who has a place at the table and who makes the important decisions that impact our lives. While today we place a premium on diversity and equality, how often we meaningfully interact with the people that are not of our culture or ethnicity. We make these educational opportunities more impactful by having dialogue with others, even when it is uncomfortable. It is when we're outside our comfort zone that we actually make a real progress and better present day.
Our roots were established here long before the United States was even declared a country. Our indigenous ancestors had great civilizations over 2 millennia ago. We never crossed the border crossed us. Today, the Latinx population of the United States is composed of people of Mexican origin, Puerto Ricans, and other Caribbeans, and more recently, Central and South Americans. This includes men, women, and individuals with different gender and sexual identities. The relatively new term Latinx thus recognizes the diversity of our population in all of its forms. It is our hope that all Albany teachers will provide appropriate instructional materials and activities to students on this great diversity.
Resolution number 2020-21-05. Whereas the Albany Unified School District Board of Education recognizes the integral role and influence of Latinx people to the history, cultural, language, and achievements of the United States. Whereas the dates of September 15 through September 18 are significant because they mark the anniversary of independence of 7 Latin American countries from Spain. Whereas the origin of the diverse Latinx population is a mixture of our indigenous ancestors of the Americas in various combinations of European, African, and Asians. Whereas the term Latinx is beginning to receive more acceptance in the community because it is a gender-neutral term that seeks to acknowledge the gender and sexual inclusion of all. Whereas Latinx students make up 16.5% of the AUSD student population, 54% of California's public school students, and it is the largest ethnic minority group in the United States. Whereas Latinx have a deep commitment to family and community, an enduring work ethic, and a distinct si se puede attitude. Be it resolved that the Albany Unified School District Board of Trustees affirms September 15th through October 15, 2020 as National Hispanic Heritage Month and encourages all district schools and teachers to commemorate this occasion with appropriate instructional materials and activities.
Wow, that was great. Thank you so much, Mr. Rubio Miranda, Ms. Quintero, Ms. Munaz. I really appreciate you coming and being a part of our board meeting to present this resolution. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having us.
Oh,
Thank you.
yeah. And I share your wish that I hope that all teachers are inspired to emphasize this in their classroom this month and throughout the year. Yeah. And with that, I will ask for a roll call for the, I have to ask for a motion.
I will move that the Board of Education approve resolution 2020-2105, recognizing National Hispanic Heritage Month here in Albany Unified.
I'll second.
Okay. And now I ask for a roll call vote, please, Ms. Shen.
Student Board Member Corzo Clark,
Yes.
Student Board Member Mala,
Yes.
Trustee Doss,
Yes.
Trustee Clark,
Yes.
Vice President Durand,
C.
President Trutain,
C.
Trustee Hinckley.
B.
Thank you.
Okay. The resolution passes unanimously. Thanks again to all who participated. Yeah. We move on to item 12-2, our learning continuity and attendance plan.
President Trutain, tonight we're going to review our learning continuity and attendance plan. Presentation presented by our Assistant Superintendent, Marie Williams. And so I'm going to pass the baton over to her at this time.
Thank you, Superintendent Wells. Good evening again, board and members of our community. So at the September 8th Board of Education meeting, we held a public hearing on the learning continuity and attendance plan. The plan is coming back to you this evening for review and approval. Julie, if you can scroll down the page just a tad there for me. So just included in the details, I wanted to just name the different ways that we have gathered input to inform the development of this plan. And if you could scroll to page number 2, Julie. I also did in the backup, take the liberty of just providing a brief summary of the elements included in the plan, which speak to in-person hybrid learning, which we're not in that phase yet, but given the good news about moving from purple to red, hopefully we will be soon when it is safe to do so. Does include information about our remote learning program, information about access to devices, student participation, attendance and engagement, and also professional development. If you could scroll down just a tad, Julie. A section of the plan asks about changing staff roles, about support for students with unique needs, which Dr. Wells spoke about that at the front end of the presentation, where he talked about the hubs that would be coming forward. Also around learning loss mitigation strategies, mental health support. So sort of those 3 bullets are addressed a little also with sort of Dr. Wells' announcement about the hubs. And then finally, the plan asks about how we will provide meals to children. So the plan has been developed in consultation with a variety of stakeholders. We have held a public hearing as required. And so this evening, we would ask that you approve our learning continuity and attendance plan. Thank you.
Board members, do you have any questions or comments?
I have a question and a comment, but Clementina, you can go first.
Thank you. Just one, which is around the learning loss mitigation strategies. Because this is so important, Assistant Superintendent Williams, could you just speak a little bit about the assessments, about how teachers and staff are going to be going about doing this so we know where the kids are at?
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about assessments. Thank you for asking the question. So I would say that their assessments are sort of happening at 2 levels. At one level, teachers are implementing their own classroom-based diagnostic assessments based on tools maybe that they have had access to in the past and can be used remotely. In addition to that, and in line with sort of the specific requirements around SB 98 and our district's goals around implementing a systematic way to assess students at the beginning of the year, in the middle of the year, and also at the end of the year. We had some assessments that we were using at the elementary grades. The system is called FastBridge. And so we will be training teachers in how to administer that assessment. Some of our primary grade teachers have already implemented that assessment. Our other elementary teachers will be utilizing that assessment. Our secondary teachers will be developing and implementing department-based assessments. And so the benefit of sort of a systematic assessment system is that then we can sort of take a look at the results as a system and then think about like what would the appropriate strategies be that tutoring, be that small group time, which I've witnessed myself. I have a child in my home who's in the 4th grade doing remote learning, be that bringing students onto campus as the hubs get going. So we are beginning, teachers have begun to assess. We will continue to build the infrastructure of a district-wide assessment system. And I believe we will be coming back to the board with information about that aspect of the plan in particular later in the fall. Did I answer your question completely?
Yes, you did.
Ask a question around attendance and get more clarification on that. And I know that when we made the decision a few board meetings ago around what we were going to do district-wide as far, in response to everything that's been happening, we included everybody, including preschool and the after-school programs. And so at this point in time, our preschool, before and after school care, and all of district-wide are all remote and nobody's in person at this time, if I understand correctly. So,
that's correct. Everybody is receiving remote instruction at this time.
Okay. So is that attendance plan, is the attendance plan the same throughout that? And can we receive information on that so that we can have an understanding as to the decisions that we made, and did we make the right decision, and is that in the best interest of students and financially and things of that nature? I hope I'm getting right.
I'm processing your question. I think you're sort of asking a question in 2 parts. I think you're asking about because you mentioned preschool and before and after care. I think you're asking about attendance in those programs specifically? Are you asking about attendance in those programs specifically?
Right.
In addition to, okay, so I'll go maybe from general to specific. And I know Executive Director Ritchie is on this meeting, and maybe she'll jump in and bail me out if I start to confuse myself. But in terms of general attendance, we are taking attendance for all students, all students participating in remote instruction, right, throughout the school day. And there are some elements of this plan that would require that if students are missing a part of the remote learning experience, that we implement strategies to re-engage them, right? So those pieces are outlined in the plan. At the very end of the document, it talks about re-engagement strategies. And so the document requires that we outline sort of a tier 1, a tier 2, and a tier 3 for our students, TK through 12, who are participating during the school day. But then the other piece I think you're also alluding to is sort of attendance and enrollment maybe around the remote program that is being offered for preschool and also for the before and after care. And so those two programs right now are not requiring that we take attendance, although we are monitoring and taking attendance for the purposes of fulfilling the requirements of those two contracts. Actually, what we are being asked to record by the state is enrollment, which is different than attendance. So I do know that, for example, in our, and I'm sure that Executive Director Ritchie can speak to preschool, but I've been supporting to this point in the before and after school program. And so they have been taking daily attendance for students. And if students, as part of the remote experience, and for students who are, missing a day or two, right, they also are sort of reaching out to try to keep those families engaged. Sort of the legal requirement right now around preschool and also before and after school is that we are recording enrollment and right now not attendance because our programs are closed. Does that answer your question?
That does answer my question. So I guess my follow-up would be, can we take attendance and can that information be shared with the board? I think that it will support the decision that we made to keep those programs operational during distance learning time.
Yeah, you're asking about having attendance be reported for preschool and then the before and after programs. You'd like to see that attendance?
Correct.
Yeah, I believe that's possible, sir.
Could I actually also add that one of the parameters, at least at the preschool level, of course, is they're not required to have daily synchronous or even daily asynchronous meetings. And so the taking of attendance in the preschool, and I can speak to that, is not available because there's no daily interaction. For example, our preschool program is putting together take-home materials that the parents come pick up weekly. There are a few opportunities to use some cell phone-based apps or iPad-based apps, but again, this is not synchronous instruction. Therefore, we could look at a protocol for taking attendance, but right now there is no daily attendance requirement. In fact, there's a weekly, I believe, number of minutes that we can even expect the students to be on a synchronous instructional platform. So Assistant Superintendent Murray Williams and I will look a little closer. Right now, though, we are not required to, nor are we requesting daily attendance for our preschool students.
And I would just quickly add to that for the before after care programs, they are doing synchronous sessions, and that's where they're generating the attendance information that we would share with you.
I have more follow-up questions, but maybe I'll check in with you guys offline or by email so that other board members have enough time to speak.
Thank you, Trustee Doss. Go ahead, Trustee Hinckley.
Sure. Thanks, Brian, for asking that question. I'm actually surprised to learn that we don't have some sort of daily live interaction in preschool. So maybe we could hear more about that in the future. What I was going to ask is that, so we had talked about October 6th, which will coincidentally be the day that we meet our 14-day threshold in Alameda County to revisit reopening elementary or other activities. So, but one of my questions is around the hubs and the work that you've already been doing to plan those activities around special education and other groups. Is that something you need to bring back to the board, or is that something you're able to move forward on without bringing it back to us?
Well, with the hubs, we have authorization from the state. And of course, we always like to have our board weigh in on big ticket items there, but we're having ongoing conversations, or we'll be having conversations with our labor unions about the readiness to do it. And in other cases, we're going to move forward with doing it, for example, with the contracting of person-to-person assessments with our contractors. That would move forward because these are federal mandates that we must do. And it doesn't wait for conversation. It's just a matter of us making sure we adhere to our federal mandates. But as it relates to the other hubs, we always want the board to weigh in and making sure we are always working within the spirit of the board. And we want to also make sure we adhere to our plan that the board has approved in terms of our LCAP, now known as the Learning Continuity and Attendance Plan. And so there'll be many opportunities to give input and give direction and as we begin to grapple with, as a country, a state, and a region, with how to do this sooner than later, but pausing to do it only when it's safe and using the medical and the science criteria to make sure our staff and students are safe. And we know that we are sometimes in conflict with, hey, we need the schools open up, because one argument is that the learning lost and who are being hurt the most. Very legitimate and fair argument, and of course, fair questions around that, versus weighing the health and safety of all is something that we continue to grapple with, but we are steadfast with doing what is first and foremost safe first, and then after that, we make moves into addressing those other issues.
Great. Just to clarify why I was asking is I read the plan as giving you as us sort of approving moving forward on the hubs, meaning that you don't need to keep bringing that back to us. But I wanted to confirm that you can move forward with that at a pace that whatever pace makes sense. I wasn't asking to be more to sort of slow that down. I hope that you feel like you have the flexibility to move that forward as quickly as it can be done safely. So thanks for clarifying.
Thank you, Trustee. And just to highlight a point, we're doing that not as a district office or school site to school site, but we're doing it in conjunction with our labor union. So we're moving together.
Thank you, trustees. We'll move to public comment on the Learning Continuity and Attendance Plan. We have a community speaker. Ms. Wallace, you can go ahead.
Hi, this is Jason Rosenberg. I guess I signed in from my wife's account. I want to thank you all for the time you've spent to date on all of this work amidst all the other pressing initiatives that the board's facing. But this issue is very near and dear to me and my family's. We are struggling with remote instruction right now, and we're asking to know what the plan is so that we're ready when the 2-week period is up. Education Code Section 43504 says schools should offer in-person instruction to the greatest extent possible. So given that we're statutorily mandated to strive to offer in-person instruction, I really want to know what our plan is so that we're ready to offer in person once we meet that 2-week period in the red tier. There is a lot of parents who are willing to help. We just need to know what we need to do to help over the stumbling blocks. This is something that mental health for not just the students, but families are suffering, and we need you to take the lead and show us how we can help and get the youngest learners in person now. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Neri Castillo-McIntyre. Please go ahead.
Hi there, everyone. Thank you for all your work on this. I really appreciate it. I'd like to ask for some clarification on one of the bullet points on the document that you presented a moment ago, and that's the fourth from the bottom on the second page that talks about the continuity learning plan for students with disabilities. I'm sure all of you have received what the Albany Disability Squad sent earlier today to the board and to administration, and the continuity learning plan has not been something that has been developed and implemented for students with disabilities, especially those students who have IEPs, the individualized education plans. The CLP is more of a general provision for all students. It's not individualized. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. And in the experience of the parents that we are in contact with, that has yet to happen. And beyond that, I do want to say in the time that I have left, thank you, Trustee Hinckley and Trustee Clark for mentioning the candidate forums. The Albany Disability Squad is hosting a candidate forum next week with all three candidates, although separately. And that is part of the squad's ongoing effort to bring about structural and systemic change in the way that special education is delivered in the district. We want to tie the board success and the superintendent success and administration success with student outcomes, positive outcomes on student supports, and a change in the model from reactive and maybe even confrontational and litigation to proactive services for the students. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Thies. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to read a rather broad statement in terms, just following up on what the previous speaker just talked about in terms of the individualization of plans. And what I'd like to do is quote from actually Justice Ruth Ginsburg, because she spoke to this issue. Less well known among many of her quotes about gender and race equality is this quote from Lane versus Tennessee, a case involving a wheelchair rider being arrested for refusing to either crawl or be carried up the courthouse steps. Justice Ginsburg grasped the most essential concept in disability rights, including individuals with disabilities among people who count in composing we the people. Congress understood in shaping the ADA would sometimes require not blindfolded equality, but responsiveness to difference, not indifference, but accommodation. Recognizing that same treatment and blindfolded equality were not enough to satisfy the mandates of equal opportunity, Justice Ginsburg paved a path to a broader, more just interpretation of the guarantee of equal protection under the law. This concept isn't just limited to disability, but to the many obstacles put in the way of all marginalized groups. In light of her passing and in light of the mandate of the ADA 504 and the IDEA, I really urge the district to find ways to bring its most vulnerable learners back, because accommodation is a form of equity. It's not something that we're doing that's extra for these kids. It's a way to actually open the schoolhouse door for them. So please treat this as the urgent matter that it is. Thank you.
Thank you. That is all of our public commenters on the learning continuity and attendance plan. I believe that it is a legal requirement that we pass a learning and continuity plan. We had the public hearing at our last meeting. I believe this is due to the state. So may I have a motion, please?
Before we do the motion, I did have an additional question.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Can we as a board discuss? I mean, we've heard a few things about the hubs. We've heard from during the superintendent report about the hubs, and then we spoke about them again during this here. Can we discuss setting a time frame and placing a time frame as to to have more concrete plans, to have so that parents can have a more concrete idea of when they can expect more, so the board can have a more concrete idea of when it, because we've been hearing about it from time to time, and it's great to hear about it, and I'm excited about it, but there's no date in place. Even if the date has to be moved, if we could set a date, and I know it's the board's, we are the when and the what, but not the how. So if we could discuss the when and the what regarding hubs, and then let the staff go into the how, I think that would be beneficial.
I want to be clear because I don't want anybody to be under any misunderstanding with the legislative requirement. The when and the how for this issue is something that must be discussed with our labor unions. And that's what makes it very difficult or different than most other issues, because otherwise you can give a date and exclude that discussion from your labor union, and then we have an issue. And that's what makes it very difficult, super complicated, because it's not like your typical and regular issue. And I wanted to be really clear with the board around that. And so the legislative intent and requirement is very different from the board giving a date on when this happens, because it's a that's spelled out. One of which is the health and safety piece. But we are going to, we can have some, as we begin to negotiate and give some direction and talk about the kind of specifics that put on the table here, those would be closed session items as it relates to perhaps giving the superintendent direction in terms of what the board preferred and the will of the board. And that would be a different arena, i.e. closed session. But in terms of when we open and how we move forward, has to be ongoing conversations with our labor union.
Thank you, Dr. Wells and Trustee Doss. I will move that we approve the 2020-2021 Learning Continuity and Attendance Plan.
Second.
I second that.
Okay. Ms. Shin, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Certainly. Student Board Member Corzo Clark.
Yes.
Student Board Member Mala.
Yes.
Trustee Clark.
Yes.
Vice President Durand.
Yes.
President Trutain.
Yes.
Trustee Hinckley.
Yes.
Trustee Doss.
Yes.
Thank you.
The motion passes unanimously. We've approved the learning continuity and attendance plan. There's a lot in it, and this is a different thing than a regular LCAP. I think that the staff heard that there's still a lot of open questions about when these things will take place and what this is going to look like. So I'm going to rely on you, Superintendent Wells, to keep both the board and the community really well informed as we start to take these new steps forward.
And President Trutain, I want to be clear, because this is a different kind of arena where we talk about well-informed. What the big frustration is, there's a lot of, throughout the country in our region, and even here at Albany, it depends. And so that keeping the board and the community informed as much as we can, and letting them know a lot of it is contingent and it depends, which is very difficult because we're so used to having all the information we need to make informed decisions. And in this pandemic, it prevents us from that. And that's very frustrating for all decision makers. But we would do our best we can.
I understand. I understand that you would like to give us a date, and that is just not possible now. Thank you very much. Okay. We will move to our item 12-3, appointment of members to District Board Policy Committee.
Okie doke, that's me again. Thank you very much. So it has been my distinct honor to facilitate our district's board policy committee since about February 2018. You can see in the backup, the AUSD first approved the establishment of a district board policy committee in November 2017. This committee was formed in part as a result of a number of recommendations coming from Albany Coming Together's policy subcommittee, of which I was a member. And we have been reviewing and revising board policies and administrative regulations related to all things student conduct, inclusivity, diversity, and enrollment processes. And we have been bringing those board policies and administrative regulations to the board for review and approval. So this item this evening is asking for the board to appoint 2 new members to our board policy committee. We have really appreciated the commitment and diligence of our committee members, but we are, per our bylaws, our term is 2 years. And so we do have a need to appoint 2 members to our board policy committee. I believe that the information was forwarded to the board. I believe that 2 applications were forwarded to you. And so at this time, I would ask that you appoint 2 new members to the board policy committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Williams. We did receive those applications, and I was very impressed by them. We have 2 openings, one for a community member and one for a parent. Our applications came from 2 parents, but only one of them is actually an Albany community member. The other application was from a parent of a student, and the parent resides outside of Albany. So this is a wonderful representation. We're really happy to see that. So I would ask for a motion to appoint Dr. Mahmoud Hussein to our community position and Mr. Ever Fuentes to our parent position.
I'll second that.
Thank you. May we have a roll call, please?
Student Board Member Corzo Clark,
Yes.
Student Board Member Mola,
Yes.
Vice President Duran,
Yes.
President Trutain,
Yes.
Trustee Hinckley,
Yes.
Trustee Doss,
Yes.
Trustee Clark.
Yes.
Thank you.
So our 2 applicants passed unanimously. I want to thank them both, if they're listening, for applying for membership to this committee, and I'll see you there. That's one of the committees that I belong to. Thank you. We move to item 12-4, updates to Albany USD Board Bylaw 9323, meeting conduct. Ms. Shin, if you could show the document, and I want to tell the public that we met in workshop prior to this meeting for the board to go over a rough draft. So I think what's going to be shown is the board bylaw in rough draft form, noting the changes that we made in that workshop. So this will be a bit messy looking, but of course, when we put this into our uploaded bylaws, it will of course be formatted properly. Board, I want to do this in an efficient way. So I'm not sure that it's necessary for us to read the entire document, but I want to give everybody a chance to make sure that the changes that were requested during our workshop were made. So yeah, so if Mission, if we can just scroll kind of slowly, if we can stop there for a minute. We made a change here so that we equally prioritized items that were of great interest to teachers and principals to be heard early in the meeting before items that our contractors were speaking of, because our teachers and our principals need to get to bed so that they can run our schools the next day. We also removed this item about closed session, just preserving our flexibility in the way that we can schedule a closed session. Julie, go ahead. We have decided that that we are going to limit our meeting extensions to two. We can have a first extension of no more than 60 minutes just by a simple majority. And we could have a second extension of another hour by a supermajority, or if fewer than 4 trustees are present, it would take all 3. We added a bullet that our goal is to limit each regular meeting open session to no longer than 3 hours. Our overall goal is to try to make our meetings accessible to our community so that people can participate and listen to items of interest and still make it to bed at a reasonable hour. We want items to be, we want to be engaging with our public. Okay. We removed limitations on agendizing items, but we noted that it can become problematic to hear all of the items that are of interest. And so we might need to use a public workshop or work study session in order to allow the board and the public to comment on prioritizing items that have not yet been agendized so that we get an idea of what we really need to hear first. Okay. We want to use all of the different means possible to satisfy questions and comments, both from our trustees and from the public. These would include referring items to staff, to standing committees, to task forces and/or school committees. And then lastly, the board, if this passes, will make a commitment to limit themselves to no more than 5 minutes for questions and comments on each agenda item. And the purpose of this is encouraging equitable participation by all trustees. Trustees, I take it back to you. If you ask for a change that somehow didn't get made, now's the time to bring that up. I want to congratulate Ms. Shen. I don't know of many people who could run a workshop online, switch over to running a webinar just a few minutes later, and incorporate, and make all of the necessary changes to a document, all at the same time. She must have an extra pair of hands on her.
Yeah, President Trutain?
Yes, go ahead, Trustee Clark.
Yeah, so when we had our discussion earlier, unfortunately, we ran out of time, and there was something that I wanted to bring up that I didn't see in here, unless I missed it. When we had our previous workshop, when we broke out into the breakout rooms and we kind of came up with some ideas and then we came back, I can't remember if the other groups agreed, but I had brought up something that I learned at the California School Board Association training I did early on about possibly limiting how many agenda items board members could ask for in a 3-month period, 6-month period, or whatever. And we never really followed up on that. So I don't know how other people feel about that, but I don't know, in my 4 years on the board, I might have brought up 5 items. So not to, kind of stifle other people from bringing up items, but I thought it was worth having a further discussion by limiting the items per board member. So it'll be something that's really, really important.
Did the Masters in Governance training through California School Board Association, did they have a recommendation?
I can't remember if they specifically had a recommendation. We were in our little breakout groups at tables, and it was definitely brought up that other school boards did do that. So I can't remember if there's a recommendation or not, but I like that idea. I just don't think it should be unlimited to where somebody can ask for, 20, 30 items. I think it focuses their decision-making process on what they want to bring forward.
I open it up to other trustees or to staff for any comment about that.
President Tutane, nothing preclude the board from amending this anytime during the year. It would give us more time to do research around evidence-based practice with CSBA and see what their recommendation is and come back and perhaps revisit it at that point.
Well, I must say, or we could, make a motion with an additional bullet if we wanted to, if the board agrees, but I have it, we would need to settle on a particular number and a particular to actually make a change right now. I'm not sure if Trustee Clark is ready to throw some figure out there, or if this is perhaps something that we should research further to get a recommendation on before we make a change.
Yeah, thank you, President Tutane. I would like to hear if people are willing to share their opinions. If the majority of the board thinks it's not a good idea, then I don't think we need to waste time coming up with a number,
Okay. So trustees, please weigh in.
Vice President Duran had her hand up before I did.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Vice President Duran, please go ahead.
Okay, I think I would like to have a lot more discussion around that. So I agree with the superintendent that maybe we could do a little bit of research and consider it further, and then have a more, maybe a more fruitful conversation at a later point. As it is, we have to extend the meeting tonight in a few minutes. And for efficiency purposes, maybe we just want to include this item in a forthcoming agenda.
I thought there were other hands up as well.
I'll be quick. I don't agree. Thank you.
Okay. So I think that's a very interesting idea. And I think that it should be researched further. And I hope that the new board will revisit all of the board bylaws about running meetings and the governance handbook when they come on. That's something that I hope the board will take on in January or February. Okay. But
just one last quick one, President.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I want to thank the other board members for sharing their opinions on this, and you and me won't be here much longer. So yeah, I think it's something that the 3 of the current board members and the 2 new incoming board members can discuss further if they'd like to.
Okay. Thank you for throwing that in. And I'm sorry that didn't get included in the draft document. I didn't get that in my notes. And so I wish I would have had it in from the beginning.
No need to apologize. You work very hard.
But I would like to, I see we're 1 minute off our adjournment time, and we haven't passed this yet. So I would like to ask for an extension of of half an hour. And so I'll first ask for that so that we can do things in the proper order. So may I get a motion to extend the meeting for half an hour?
Could I add a slight change to that, President?
Sure.
Just to make it 60 minutes, so if the half hour is not enough, we don't have to do this again.
Okay, good strategy. Yes. So I will take that as a motion. Trustee
second.
Second. May we have a roll call, please, on the extension of the meeting?
Student Board Member Corso Clark,
Yes.
Student Board Member Mallah,
Yes.
President Trutain,
Yes.
Trustee Hinckley,
Yes.
Trustee Doss,
Yes.
Trustee Clark,
Yes.
Vice President Duron.
Yes.
Thank you.
The motion passes unanimously. I will then ask if we could have a motion to, with the noted changes, to pass these revisions of AUSD Board Bylaw 9323 and to make at the same time these same changes to our governance handbook. So just to take this and drop it into the governance handbook so that the two documents will be the same.
Yeah, I make a motion that we approve the updates to the Albany USD Board Bylaws 9323.
Second.
Okay, and Trustee Clark, does that include updating simultaneously the governance handbook so they'll be the same?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot that part.
Thank you. And that was seconded. May I have a roll call, please?
Student Board Member Corso Clark,
Yes.
Student Board Member Mallah,
Yes.
Trustee Hinckley,
Yes.
Trustee Doss,
Yes.
Trustee Clark,
Yes.
Vice President Duron,
Yes.
President Trutain.
Yes. So the revision of the board bylaw and the governance handbook equivalently passed unanimously. I want to thank everybody very much for their efforts in trying to make our meetings more timely and efficient. I will take us to our last action item, 12-5, amendment number 1 to the lease agreement between Albany Unified School District and the Berkeley Albany YMCA.
Thank you, President Trutain. As our CBO will prepare for a brief presentation, we had a chance to answer some questions from our labor union earlier today. And as you know, we received 2 letters that went to the board regarding expressing their concerns by members of the ACC community. And those are not confidential letters. Those are public documents, and in the spirit of transparency, should be addressed and shared when asked. But in it, one of the, I wanted to give clarification about some facts because it alluded to our board not giving preschool the attention that it needs and giving the YMCA preschool the attention, and they're not getting. And I wanted to be clear to the public that I want to speak to some facts and truth, and that is that this board has made a major commitment and contribution based on facts. They voted not long ago to contribute $665,000 from general ed fund to the ACC program to demonstrate their commitment to see to it that our program survive. And so to be accused that we don't give much attention to our programs would not be consistent with our actions as verified with documentation. And they did that even though it was not something in how we use general fund historically. And so it was a precedented move because of their commitment to our preschool and seeing that it survived and our before school and after school program. I did want to highlight that. At this time, we're going to talk about amending a lease. I think that would benefit not only one of our partners in our community, YMCA, but also our teachers who are reached out and wonder about the opportunity of childcare. We couldn't reserve spots for them in our preschool program because our subsidized families have priorities. But with the YMCA program, they were in agreement to make some adjustments for our teachers so that they can have childcare when needed. So at this time, to talk about this lease agreement or that's coming before you would be our very own CBO, Jackie Kim.
Good evening, Board, Superintendent Wells, and our members of community. So YMCA approached to the district in the summer and indicated that they were planning to provide childcare services on their Solano facility. However, due to the reduced number of families they would be served due to the COVID-19, they asked if the district would consider waiving the rent. So then the district agreed to reduce YMCA monthly rent in exchange of discounted childcare for our AUSD staff. And with this amendment, our staff would get 50% monthly cost of 50% off of the childcare cost, which is $600 monthly. And they plan to serve up to 10 AUSD staff families per location. So this really benefits our staff, teachers, and our communities. And this is consistent with other YMCA and other school districts in Bay Area. So we have this amendment to the board this evening for board to review and approve the amendment. And the representative from YMCA is here this evening to answer any questions we might have.
Thank you, CBO Kim and Superintendent Wells. The board, do you, I think that we should probably introduce our YMCA representative.
Hi, I'm Alicia Butler, and I'm the Executive Director of Youth Development for the YMCA of the East Bay.
Thank you.
Happy to be here with you guys tonight.
I'm glad you could make it. Yeah. So board, do we have any specific questions for Ms. Butler or any of our district staff?
President Tutane, just an FYI, we also have Mary Diella, Executive Director of YMCA, with us as well.
I thought I saw Ms.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, so I'm the Executive Director of the Albany Y, and Alicia is Executive Director of Out of School Time Child Development.
Well, I just want to thank you for all of the work you've done. I think that the Y is a fine institution, and my family are members, and we enjoy your programs very much. So I wanted to thank you for working with the district and trying to come to an agreement that would assist our teachers in achieving some childcare. I open it up to, let me see. Trustee Hinckley, please go ahead.
Thanks. So given our discussion earlier about asking everything at once, I'm going to ask everything at once. I don't mean to be overwhelming, but we're trying to limit how much time we take. So some of these I think may really be questions for the district. And I will also say both of my kids have participated at the Y. You know, it's a great program, middle school. Highly recommend the middle school homework club, which I assume isn't happening now. But anyway, Y is doing great stuff. But I have several concerns about the structure of this. So I'll start with maybe the questions. So Dr. Wells referred to teachers approaching the district needing preschool care, but my understanding is that the program the Y is running at the Solano facility, the one that's $1,200 a month that teachers would get half off of, is K through 5. So I guess my first question is, what are the ages of care that would be available for teachers in either the Cornell space or the Solano space. The second question is, if we have a maximum of 10 teachers, kids who can get spots, but are we guaranteed some of those spots? Particularly, are they guaranteed at the Solano facility, since if we reopen schools, which now seems possible, you would no longer be operating at Cornell. So what happens to the 10 kids that the district is essentially spending this money to get care for if we lose access, or if the Y loses access to Cornell? Third, I have questions. My overall question for the district is, if our goal is to use this money essentially that we're no longer collecting from the Y to support the needs of our teachers, what efforts have been made to actually identify what those needs are and make sure that what we're getting is equivalent to spending about $60,000, $66,000 to get childcare for our teachers? Is there a different way to do this, particularly using district resources, if possible? Yeah, and then I guess I'll just make a statement, which is that I'm having a hard time imagining, as much as I appreciate everything that the Y has done, I'm really having a hard time understanding the rationale for us to forego revenue and add an additional leasing space, at least a temporary one. And I'd like to understand a lot more what we envision getting in exchange for that. We're also paying a lot of rent for a facility in Berkeley for our district offices. And I don't know if we've asked for some relief on that rent, but I'd just like to understand more of the district's rationale for asking for this amendment. So thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Hinckley. Let me try to answer at least one of the questions around our thinking. Typically, during COVID, a number of folks have taken a hit in revenue. Our partner, who's been a long-lasting partner with us for decades, the YMCA, which is an integral part of the fabric of this community here in Albany. And as you mentioned, we had kids who go through the programs. I had all three of my kids go through the programs. And it's a very well-respected institution. There's some options. And I'm going to just give it to you from my perspective. The YMCA can serve us notice that they vacating, and we wouldn't get the revenue, and we wouldn't have had an opportunity to renegotiate and be a real partner in the greatest time of need and turn our backs to them. And so being a partner, from our perspective, is not when everything is going fine, but it's during these difficult times where the cream rises to the top and true partnership come to the forefront. And that's what we wanted, to have a real true partnership during these difficult times, because this is good for our community and including our teachers. So that was the rationale we used about moving forward with this deal. And I think it was important, and I appreciate the question of what was our thinking about why have this deal on the table. And I hope that helps. For the other questions, I turn it over to our CBO, Jackie Kim, and I can pick up another one if you like.
The other question might be NPR at Cornell site. So when district moved to the hybrid model, that means district is also able to provide in-person childcare services. So our staff who's going to be at the NPR at Cornell, or even YMCA, they can have our childcare in-person services under the hybrid model. And also because YMCA won't have the full-time students because the school district is open under the hybrid model. So we have a room to modify the schedules. Okay, and district will assume the Cornell side, of course, when we move to hybrid model. So I don't see the schedule conflicts on that because it will be at the same time together. When we have a hybrid model, we will also provide in-person childcare services as well from our own district fund. And the other question, I don't.
The age range, I think, of the children that would be served by the YMCA program, and whether these 10 spots for Albany teachers' children would be assigned to the Solano site or to the Cornell NPR.
Right. So maybe I will refer to YMCA, but their plan is to open the Solano site first, up to 24 to a little, maybe more than 24. And then we can have our 10 teachers or 10 families of our staff. And then when they have more needs or more families enroll, and they will open the second site, which is the NPR. And then they will accept another additional 10 families at NPR. So that is the plan. So at this point, we actually do not know if they are gonna use both sites. Because they are going to open the first one, the Solano site first. And I will actually ask Alicia for the age of.
I'm just based on our research, it was K-5.
Yes. K through 5. We might move to serving TK. We were just trying to support our families who had the older children who needed the most distance learning support. And so, as Jackie stated, we are wanting to fill the slots on Solano first. And then once we're full, and we can take up to 28, the rules have changed. So there's 14 per group now. Once we fill those spaces, then we would be in communication with the district to see where they are with moving to the hybrid model. Because we don't want to move to the hybrid model. We don't want to move into the multipurpose room. And then a week later, we're moving into the hybrid model, and we have to find space for those families who are enrolled.
Thank you very much, Ms. Butler. I appreciate that. Can we go to Vice President Durand so you can ask your questions?
Yes, I'll do the several questions at once, and then district or the Y can respond. And I agree with everybody. The Y provides an invaluable service to the community. And I do think that we, during this time of crisis in particular, should be hand in hand helping one another. But I have a real issue with this whole idea, honestly. And I'll just begin by saying that that if you need financial relief or aid, were other considerations, other options raised? For example, that the district could, that you could pay the district at the end of the year, or you could pay them in year 2. Were any other options discussed besides this idea that came up?
President, Vice President, can we take one at a time?
Which, if that's fine, I just wanted my 5 minutes, right?
Well, I will try to borrow some time, but let me ask that because that's a really important question. The short answer is no, because this practice is common throughout. Some of the districts in our regions have already engaged in this kind of practice with YMCA and other organizations. So we didn't explore any other options. For example, paying at the end of the year. We didn't, so I just wanted to be real clear. So the short answer is no.
Okay, and I have a real concern about the money because we have, I'm afraid at the end of this year, towards the end of the year, we're going to be asked to cut again. And I don't want to think that $60,000 that could have helped our deficit has gone to this issue. And so like I said, I have concerns about that. And just tonight we were talking about diversifying our narrative, and that I could see money's going to that instead of this. And I guess two other things. One is about discounts. Don't Albany, because this is our facilities, doesn't the Y provide an automatic discount or not for our families? And the second and last question, which is what I'm getting to in terms of my unease totally with this whole issue, is that honestly, it is our parents that I see are in crisis mode, first of all. I mean, I will be blunt in saying that at least teachers have an option to either make that decision to stay home and be able to supervise their kids. And I understand it's difficult. I understand it's near impossible, but at least they have that option, or to take the kids to school with them, where they can, be online with the kids there, with their students there. On the other hand, it is our parents, the community, who has, I feel, really suffered, and we've seen that through the letters they have sent us over and over again, how they are in crisis mode because many of them do not have the luxury of staying home and or taking their child to work with them. And they're stuck. And in some cases, they're leaving their kids unattended, unsupervised at home. And to me, that is a crisis. And there are a few parents that have documented to us where they have dragged their kid to work with them. And those kids have ended up at the deputy's office, sheriff's office in San Francisco. I mean, to me, that is really the priority, would be our parents who have their children who are not going to school in person right now and who need some real assistance. And they've been crying out since we've started this, since COVID came to visit us. Since that day, they have been reaching out to us and saying, please help, we need support. And so that's my opinion.
Vice President Duran, I want to make sure I didn't miss the question in the second one. Did I miss the question? I'm not sure. I want to make sure I answered all the questions.
Well, it was more about, do we get a discount? Do we automatically get a discount since it is our facilities? Does the Y give us a discount? And just that I had mentioned about, it really wasn't a question, about literature being also a high priority in our district, and being sure we have money when we need it, and then we're not going to go to a fiscal deficit discussion once again and start thinking about our 60K.
Okay. Yes, it'd be a 50% discount for our staff.
And our parents?
I think that Vice President Duran is asking about outside of this agreement. Is there any discount on childcare for AUSD staff or for Albany parents? I think that the—
Can I answer? I'll be happy to answer that. And Alicia, you can jump in as well. We only serve Albany Unified School District children and families. So there's no discount because that's who we're serving. We are serving the children of the community of Albany. So there's no discount in that way, and we don't discount teachers usually. Everybody is eligible to apply for financial assistance during usual times also, and we provide a fair amount of financial assistance. And we raise over $170,000 every year to provide financial assistance to families who can't afford the full cost of our programs. So in answer to your question, we don't provide discounts because that's who we're serving, are the community and the children of Albany School District.
Thank you. And Superintendent, maybe if you could just expand about why other options weren't looked into in terms of how to solve a financial issue.
I'm not trying to be curt in any way. It was maybe the time, and we were looking at what were current acceptable practices and what would be in the legal means, consulting our legal counsel, and our legal advice was saying this would be our best option, and because it's precedented and it's common.
Okay, so I want to, we have both Trustee Doss and Trustee Clark who have questions and comments, so I do want to be able to move to them. Before I do that, I wanted to quickly add, my youngest is in high school right now, so I'm out of touch with what it costs for childcare. And so I went to some local sources, Berkeley Parents Network, et cetera, to look up. And the figure that I found was that the going rate for full-time childcare in this area is $1,600. So I was a bit surprised to see that the cost at the YMCA was just $1,200, which would be reduced down to $600 if this agreement were to pass for Albany teachers. So I think that Albany is getting, it seems to me that this is a discounted rate based on my internet search. Then I'd like to go ahead, and I'm not sure which, whether it was Trustee Doss or Trustee Clark that put their hand up first.
Trustee Clark can go first.
Thank you, President Trutain. Usually I like to save my questions for last, so I can go, but I also noticed we had a member of the public who would like to speak as well. So if Trustee Doss would like to go, and then we can get to the public, and then I can follow up at the end. I prefer that.
That's fine with me.
Thank you. Thank you, Trustee Doss.
No problem. I have a few questions, and then I have 2 comments. So I guess I'll just pre-warn I'll just read all my questions, say my comments. You guys can take notes and answer them, because I want to be in the interest of time, and I want to hear public comment as well as Trustee Clark. There was a comment made about they could not renew the lease. Well, if they didn't renew the lease, then we could move the district office back to Albany, and then that would save us $96,000, which is $36,000 more than the $60,000 we would lose. So I didn't really appreciate that comment, because it just, I don't know. The YMCA is there, and it's a great service, so we want to work towards keeping them there. But if they do choose to leave, we currently pay for a space that inconveniences the parents and our staff, and we could save money by moving it back. We could save almost $100,000 with $36,000 difference. So that was that comment. I also feel a little uncomfortable doing this additional work and helping the YMCA to open back while we haven't figured out our own hubs and how we're going to open back, because maybe we could use that space to open our own hubs and serve the students and kind of figure out that. So I would feel more comfortable if we had a handle on how we were going to open for our actual educational purposes and the hubs, and had a handle on that before we start helping outside entities open up their services for in-person. Here are my questions. Do we know how many teachers would use this, and if it would actually be 10 teachers that would use it so that it would break even? I'm assuming the number 10 came from the 60,000, because I mean, it averages, it breaks even. If the site locations increase, then would the numbers increase? Meaning, will we be allotted more spaces if more locations were opened up for the Y? And then when would this start? And so what's the timeline as to when students will be able to participate, or teachers will be able to utilize this? Thank you.
Trustee Doss, I appreciate the questions. We had in-depth discussion about this, because one of the issues was we too have a preschool. And so how do you deem that it's safe to open preschool at one site of our school, i.e. Carnell, and not at the other site? And so it has to be done simultaneously in terms of declaring it safe to do so. And so that makes the most sense to us. It can't be safe for one entity and not the other. So that's a really important question. As far as staff, we're only talking about 10 spots. We've been getting inquiries unsolicited, significantly well over 10. So we imagine for our staff that would be used very quickly. And if the YMCA expand, so will the number of spots available to our sites. You asked how many will be allotted if they have more people coming to more different programs. That means there'll be more spots for our staff. I think I got those two questions. Was there another one in there?
I asked about the timeline as to when things would start.
And that's where it gets tricky again. It depends on when it's deemed safe, because those are our sites, and it's something we have to continue to discuss with the YMCA and our preschools, because when it's safe to do so for one, it's safe to do so for both. And so the timeline, that's where the frustration comes. It depends.
Thank you.
So this item is opened up for public comment. Our first speaker is Ms. Walden.
Hi, are you hearing me okay?
Yes.
So the superintendent began this presentation with a defense of the of his treatment of ACC, and therefore it is fair and appropriate for us to talk about real facts here. So it is a fact that the budget deficit that the superintendent asked this board to approve was based on an assumption that the childcare programs of ACC could not move beyond 7 rooms, and that the superintendent told this board that there did not exist additional space that could be used, and in that was limiting the budget of the ACC potentially and creating this imaginary deficit. And so now suddenly there's space that can be used, and it can be used by the Y. It is also a fact that part of that deficit was created by charging the ACC rent for its own facilities, for our own facilities, charging one of our programs rent for our own facilities in order to show a deficit that is in fact just an own goal, if you will. The issue here is that the superintendent has 3 times now presented to this board an opportunity for this board to give a private institution public funds or access to public facilities. And as the Doss and Hinckley and Duran are pointing out, those public facilities belong to the public and they're to be used for the public. We should be maximizing their use for the benefit of the community in a free way. We should be maximizing their use for parents who need subsidies as opposed to parents who don't. And we should be insisting that our public buildings get used first by the school district in a way that is best for the school district. It's ridiculous for us to pay a private company in Berkeley to use offices when we have facilities in the Bay, right here in Albany.
Thank you, Ms. Walden. Okay, we move to Ms. Davidson.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my comments. Oh, I'm gonna wait for that to reset. Okay. We are also parents of young children here in Albany, and this has been really hard, but being a teacher last year, I understand the balance of needs for our teachers. I have a really hard time understanding why we would give a private company anything like this when we can't support our own internal needs. We're a public entity meant to serve the public, and our spaces should be used for that to the fullest extent right now. I think Ms. Walden just brought up, we need to support the community in a free way. The community who is paying their taxes to be here in Albany and have these services provided should not have to pay a second time to another entity while they're getting a discount from the district. I fully want to support our teachers and their childcare needs, but But I think we can do that by having our own programs run by our own district. If our school campuses are closed to our own students until 3:30, then it makes little sense that we're going to let groups of other students onto the campus in other ways if the reason was that it's too loud in the background of Zooms or anything like that. I think we really need to have a clear message here, and our clear message needs to be that we support our children having safe, solid care and educational experiences, and they need to happen in our district facilities. Also, if we're paying $100,000 or close there for district offices in Berkeley, let's move them back onto our own campus right now if we have that space. Now, I'm a longtime supporter of the YMCA, worked there for many, many years, and I would love to see that program thrive, but everyone is making cuts right now and everyone is struggling. We've got to support the children and do what's best for the children. And right now, that is looking at a comprehensive plan to provide access on our public campuses. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davidson. Let's take it back to the board. Trustee Clark.
Yeah, thank you, President Trutain. I have quite a few questions and concerns about this item as well. The first one, I guess, would be a question to Dr. Wells, and I want to make sure I heard this correctly, but if the YMCA brought this up over the summer, like, why are we just hearing about it right now? And I'm also concerned, and it's related to this, usually items come up as review and discussion first. Just all of a sudden it just shows up and it's review and action. So that concerns me as well. So maybe you could answer those, please, Dr. Wells.
Let me answer the first one about it coming up over the summer. I'm familiar with it recently and referred it to our legal counsel. And so after getting a legal opinion about what best to do in this scenario and what were some precedented practices, this was a recommendation. In terms of the second question, can you repeat that one?
Yeah, this came up as review and action opposed to review and discussion. Usually it goes review and discussion first.
Thank you for that. As you know, the agenda setting committee that meets with the superintendent, 2 board members and a superintendent, they make the decision at that time, or / we make the decision at that time where we put items. And so as a committee, we put that on review and action. But upon further review, it in terms of process, it could have been put in review and discussion.
All right, thank you for answering those. The next one, I guess, would be a statement. Ever since I've been on the board, we've been running a structural deficit. We've hired a lot of big ticket positions. I know you're asking for more coming up, and I can't really justify $66,000 coming out of our budget when Trustee Duran brought up earlier that it's possible that we're going to be making cuts again down the road. So that's a statement. And then the last one would be the issue about 10 teachers' families having these spots, and you said there's more people who are interested. So are we gonna like do a lottery or something? I think that just causes more problems, right? So now we have 16 families, for example, who wants to get in, and it's just the luck of the draw. Those 10 families happen to get it and the other 6 don't. It just, to me, opens up a lot of issues. So that would be my question. Yeah, I guess so. If we have more than 10, how are we going to decide which 10 get it?
As we get into the how, we were thinking that first come, first serve, and that would be for us the easiest, simplest way, opposed to waiting for everybody to get an application and then doing a lottery. And so that's our thinking at this point.
So what? So the early bird gets the worm? I mean, opposed to somebody who might need it more than somebody else?
I think there's some pros and cons on both, but it would be first come, first serve.
All right, thank you.
Okay, board. I think I've heard the will of the board pretty clearly. When there's not a motion to approve an item, the item just dies. So I'm gonna give a moment in case anyone wants to make a motion. and then we can move on. Okay, hearing no motion, there is no action on 12-5, amendment number one to lease agreement between Albany Unified School District and the Berkeley Albany YMCA. Then we move to our upcoming agenda items. And I do have a slide. Let me see. Ms. Shin, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to share my screen. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so I wanted to just bring forward when we're talking about upcoming agenda items. We were speaking about agendizing issues and all of that in relationship to our board bylaw 9323. And I wanted to update the board, not so specifically on what's coming at the next meeting in our first October meeting, but what we'll be dealing with in general over this school year. So we have a strong focus on academic achievement. We have the task force that's working on that. We also have a series of presentations that are going to begin soon, that are going to be delivered by each of our school's principal, specifically on academic achievement issues at that school. We're going to have those this fall, and I think they're going to present some of their assessments, start of year assessments. We're going to go back through all of the schools at the end of the year and look for change, look for positive change. We also have this transition to hybrid learning, which we've talked about tonight, and we'll continue to talk about that until we make it there. Another strong focus is equity and equity training across the district. At least to my mind, that includes the professional development that we were talking about for the teachers that would help them address issues of race and in their classroom. We have the Diversifier Narrative student campaign. We've seen that twice already this year. And after progress is made and books purchased and teachers pilot them, that we'll be seeing that back again in the spring. We'll also be talking a little bit about 21st century learning, the focus on student voice. We have some upcoming presentation on that. And the issue of the ethnic studies graduation requirement is currently being looked at by the AHS Instructional Improvement Council. I'm not even sure that they've met yet this year, but they are going to focus on that issue and then bring that back to the board. Enrollment and attendance is always board business, and we need to get our report on how that's going this year and to get our numbers from our census day. So we'll be seeing this in October, the second meeting in October. Mental health tracking, we have not yet heard the statistics from last year. I think those will be significant given the pandemic. We have an ongoing issue of teacher recruitment that we need to deal with. And we also have a budget focus. So there's been talk about having a budget workshop for the board and having that as a scheduled board meeting so that all of the board members who want to can attend. And also the budget advisory committee would be invited attendees to that. So we could all get that information together. And also it was mentioned that the school safety plans are an item that needs to be reviewed annually. That got missed last year during the shutdown. And then lastly, we have the parcel tax overview and update, a closed session item, just more of a general information and overview for the board. So with that, there's no further comments. I would like to move to adjourn.
I had my hand up, President Trutain.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Trustee Clark, please take the floor.
Yeah, so thank you. I might have the date incorrect, but when we decided to go to distance learning, I thought we were supposed to have an update around October 5th, and that's fast approaching. And our next board meeting, I don't think till the following week. So I don't know if we can sneak in a special board meeting, but we made a commitment to the community to give an update on where we are by October 5th. And I think we need to stand by that.
Yeah, it's October 6th is the date that we set aside that's in the minutes.
Yeah, and the following week, I think, is our meeting. So we should adhere to that.
So Dr. Wells, how are you planning to update the board and the community by the October 6th deadline?
It was going to be by a notification via a letter, official letter, that the board would get first, and then we send out to the community with the current status. Or if we were in a status where it seemed safe, call an emergency meeting. Right now, I don't think emergency meeting might be warranted, but if the board want to do that, we can do that independent of the current status as we look at the matrix.
Yeah, I'd appreciate it if the board would like to weigh in on that, because I don't think a letter to the community is sufficient. Just my opinion. Sorry.
I spoke over somebody.
No, sorry, Trustee.
Okay.
I kind of spoke over you. Sorry.
Sorry, we're all so tired of zooming over each other. Yeah, I think so. I agree. I think I'd like a real update by that October 6th, partly because we committed to it and partly because that marks the 14 days if Alameda County stays in the red zone or area, whatever they're called. So I think we've heard from the community a lot of desire for more information and updates about how planning might be going for returning to in-person. So I don't know what form you're imagining this letter could take, so I don't want to speak to that, but I think we need a substantive update and conversation at that time, because otherwise we're sort of pushing further and further away from that deadline by the time the board convenes on the 13th.
And I want to be clear, the meeting that we would have on the 6th would be a meeting where we would have an update, and then the board would take over and make a decision on whether or not we open or not.
We don't currently have a meeting scheduled for October 6th.
That's what Trustee Clark was talking about, to have one.
Okay, I am seconding Trustee Clark's idea that we meet rather than have a letter. Thanks.
Other board opinion?
Go ahead, Trustee Duran.
Your turn first, okay?
Okay, I'll take it. I'll be brief. I think that we have a lot of things to discuss. I really would like to have an in-depth discussion about the hubs, because, like, again, we've talked about it a lot, and a lot of parents have talked about it. And at this point, I feel as if we have the green light to do it from the powers. They've told us that we can do it, and now I'd like to really have an in-depth discussion as to why we aren't currently doing it, what's holding it up, how we can move it forward. Does the board need to give instruction to do it? Do we need to set a date? I know it was stated that we need to talk about certain things in closed session. So if somebody could kind of clarify what needs to be talked about in closed session, what we can talk about in open session, what the board needs to do to move this forward. Because, I mean, at this point, I've heard it on more than one occasion. We've mentioned it to the community, and parents are in need now. And I don't think that they can, I don't think that the students are in a position during this situation to wait for us to, for lack of better words, drag our feet. So what can we do to move this forward so that the kids can get what they need?
I would like to second Trustee Doss in everything he said. I really think that we need, our community wants answers, and October 6th used to be far away. Now it's on top of us, and we really need to give the community some very clear-cut answers, and a letter certainly wouldn't do that, and a letter would just raise more questions. So I think we just need to lay it all out very clearly, all the different aspects of this issue. So I definitely am in favor of having a meeting. Whether October 5th is a good enough date or if we need to do it sooner.
And I see your hand up, Trustee Hinckley. Did you want to speak again?
Just to add a piece of what I think it is I'd like to hear, which is I understand there's a negotiations piece, but there's also a lot of logistical details that I know staff have been working on. You know, how would students get in and out? What kind of equipment do we need? How do we get that equipment? And I know Alameda County is going to work on developing more of that guidance in the next 2 weeks. So I think that's some of the content that could be part of our discussion. Again, just to sort of show the community and the board that we're working on these very detailed plans that we're ultimately going to need to be able to bring students and teachers safely back. So I understand that there's a lot that needs to be negotiated, but I think there are also just a lot of, you know, how many masks do we have? How many can we secure? What are the contracting processes? Where are we on the air filtration? All of these items that I think we can discuss earlier so that when we get to a point where we have some understanding with our teachers, we have all of that lined up.
Okay.
And we've processed it as a board.
Thank you, Trustee Hinckley. Those are good specific items to deal with. I want to acknowledge Student Board Member Corso Clark. Please go ahead.
Yeah, just on the student side of things, you know, Audrey and I we're planning to do more student input gathering and surveys and discussions on that front. And I think that the data that we collect from the student body would be valuable to share with the board in a discussion setting. I also think it would be a good idea to have a discussion like Trustee Hinckley was talking about with the fine details, because a lot of things that students have expressed, and also parents too, in my memory specifically, that one woman or mother who spoke when we presented the LCAP 2.0 last meeting, who talked about how she felt it was unclear what exactly our planning was for when we return to hybrid learning, other than just what students are on campus and on what days. And so I think that having a discussion where we presented those details as well as input from students and other members of the community would be very valuable for this incredible decision that we're going to eventually make.
Yes, I agree with you. Eventually, this is going to be over and we're going to be back at school. I see Trustee Clark.
Yeah, thank you, President Trutain. I have a quick question, a request, and a comment. Keep it real quick. So the first question is for Dr. Wells. Do we have dates set already with our labor partners to talk about the possible reopening?
We met with our for example, co-ATA president today to further reach out to schedule some dates.
So there's no date set yet, but you're in the process of doing that.
Yeah, we initiated conversation today.
Thank you. And then the next one would be a request. I think all the board members received an email about this issue, and one of the speakers tonight in agenda's not on the or items not on the agenda brought it up. As far as the safety at Albany High School, I brought this up a while back and it just didn't go anywhere. And unfortunately, from my experience, I think sometimes when stuff comes from me, it just doesn't get anywhere. So I was glad to see that other people brought it up, and I hope we can get some momentum. It looks like we're going back to school soon, and I think they brought up a good point that why students aren't there, we should try to make our Albany High School campus more secure. Like I said, I brought it up before. We have funding and we find money for all certain things, but to have our campus just so wide open like that, after we know some of these terrible things that have happened, it's just very scary to me how open our campus is at the high school. So I don't know if anybody else agrees or what the next steps would be, but I fought for this like over a year ago and it went absolutely nowhere. So I'm hoping we can talk about this.
Trustee Clark, thank you for that. I just want to ask the board that when the board get these letters, that we don't create a secret, unintentionally create a form that feels secretive, that if they can forward the letters that come to them when I'm not included to me in the spirit of transparency, it would be very helpful because those become public documentation and they're not personal or to be something that I don't have access to, but the public has a right for them. So I'm going to make a public request to have any communication regarding school issues or the district issues that the board get and I'm not included to be included.
Yeah, that's fine. I can forward them to you, but I mentioned earlier, somebody spoke tonight at the meeting. So it has nothing to do with transparency. You heard the speaker tonight.
Oh, no, I wasn't referring to you, Trustee Clark. I'm talking about in general.
So maybe you can just make a request that when board members get emails, we just forward them to you. I don't have a problem with that. There's no secrecy going on here. I don't appreciate that comment. I'm talking about safety for our students in our community. And I didn't see anything secretive going on. So I don't know if that's what you meant, but that's what it sounded like to me.
Okay,
if I remember right, this came up once before and we decided that it was the president's, that the president often forwarded things to the superintendent. I don't know that board members always need to do that. I do, but I feel like we've had this conversation once before. But yeah, there's nothing secretive going on here. Board members get hundreds of emails, so.
You know, I think that, so I will take responsibility. It's that I guess it is one of the jobs of the president to, when the entire board is sent an email, the president should check and make sure that the superintendent was included. And I miss a few. So generally I do. I forward, you guys know how much email we get, and I forward a lot to the superintendent. And it seems like lately there has been a spate of emails that haven't been including the superintendent. And so this is one that I missed. I'm searching for it now, and I'm happy to send it on to the superintendent. And of course, when there is a school issue that is being brought to the attention of the board, it ought to also be brought to the attention of the superintendent.
I think that's fine. I don't think that was Dr. Wells' intention. I think that he was just using it as an opportunity to make a point to send the emails, which is fine. We'll send you the emails. If you receive emails that you think the board should be privy to, forward them on, which I'm sure you do as much as you possibly can. We're all human. But back to board member Clark's original point, which was the safety. Can we officially put that on the list and make that an agenda item so that we can actually discuss it in detail? And can we try and get it on the agenda so that we can discuss it before kids are back in school? I think that would be, I think that would kind of serve the purpose.
Trustee Doss, I think when it comes to health and safety, that leapfrogs everything else. And it's incumbent upon us to make it a priority. So thank you for that, both Trustee Clark and Trustee Doss.
And I want to, first of all, I want to acknowledge the wisdom of Trustee Clark, who said when we did our extension to go ahead and do it for 1 hour so we wouldn't have to do it again. It is 9:39, so we're 1 minute away from the end of our extension. And I believe that we're done for this evening. I want to thank all of our trustees, all of our guests, all of our public viewers, our community. And with that.
Can I get like 20 seconds in? Try to get under 9:40 real quick.
Yeah, talk fast.
Yeah, I just want to thank Trustee Doss and Superintendent Wells for acknowledging my request. Thank you to both of you.
Thank you. All right. And with that, 9:40, we are adjourned.